Carlton fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and once again the D's failed to fire in September and were embarrassingly bundled out in straight sets for the second season in a row. Have we blown another opportunity to capitalise on having one of the best midfields and defences of our generation? Joining me tonight to discuss the devastating semi-final loss to the Blues is longtime Demonlander George. Good evening, George.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening to Ben Man. Good evening to all the Demon listeners. And I'd just like to say thank you to all those Demonland listeners who've been sending very kind messages to us through the website and individually. All you're doing is encouraging us. So this could go on for 4 hours tonight. So we'll see how we go.
I doubt we're going to go longer than we did for a grand final victory. I'm, as I was saying to you, I'm very flat. We'll talk about in a minute about our emotions. But before we do that, also joining us tonight to perhaps provide a positive spin on the loss, if there can be a positive spin to such a soul-crushing defeat, is Bin Man. Good evening, Bin Man.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, George. Good evening, Demonlanders. I'm not going to be providing much positive spin tonight, I don't think. And I can't imagine this will go for 4 hours. It's been a tough few days. Denial's not just a river in Egypt, it's also the first stage of Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief, and I am 100% moored in that stage of grief in denial so far. So my big thrill for the weekend, I've read a little bit of Demonland. I haven't listened to any media at all, straight into the Spring Carnival. So I was thrilled Mr. Brightside brained him, and we've got a new star from the West in Amelia's Jewel, who lived up to expectations and brained them at Flemington on Saturday as well. So my mind's turned to the Spring Carnival. And unfortunately, we've got a podcast to do, and so my ability to deny what happened on Friday and pretend it didn't happen is being jolted a little bit. So away we go.
Well, Ben Man's in denial. What happened to our destiny after last week? That was
a typo.
Okay.
It wasn't destiny. I misread it. It's denial is what actually I read. I should have read in the chat room, but we certainly weren't possessed. Maybe we were repossessed. So I think they've got to work on their taglines for next year. Denial is a lot more, and dynasty's also, got a question mark on it as well, hasn't it?
Well, I think after 2 years, and it'll be 3 years since next year. It'll be 3 years since 2021. I don't know if that's part of a dynasty. It might have to be a new dynasty we'll have to create. Well, we've had the extra day to decompress. We usually go live on a Monday. This is Tuesday. So before we get into our listener questions, perhaps this is a good time. We've heard a little bit from Bin Man to get our thoughts on what was another wasted final series and ultimately another wasted season. The loss has been the most painful experience for me, not only throughout this season, but in recent memory. I think it surpasses the heartache of the last year's semi-final defeat to the Lions. It eclipses the disappointment of the 2018 preliminary finals in Perth. And surprisingly, and dare I say it, it might even surpass the agony of the 2000 grand final loss. Well, maybe not that grand final loss. But as regular listeners of the show know, my footballing nemesis is Carlton. I grew up surrounded by an army of Blues supporters at school, and my closest friends are all diehard Carlton fans, and they always had the upper hand when it came to the ultimate success. But fortunately, from my teenage years onwards, we've held that advantage in terms of win-loss ratio against them, and most importantly, we've consistently knocked them out of finals when we've encountered them. So losing to them in this matter was emotionally devastating. It was gut-wrenching, and even in the sobering light of day, it was still soul-crushing. And I've tried to reassure myself that it's just a game. But for me, given my role in running the Demonland website day in and day out for nearly a quarter of a century, producing we're up to 209 episodes of this podcast over the past 7 years, and enduring as a dedicated Demon fan for almost 47 years, with only one premiership to show for it, which incidentally we had to watch from the comfort of our living rooms due to worldwide pandemic. It's more than just a game, and yes, I acknowledge that there are more pressing and devastating events and issues unfolding in the world, but for this brief period, this loss just stung, and it stung hard. And I haven't been able to engage with social media. I've even refrained from actively participating in Demonland, as I fear that it just might reopen some of those deep emotional wounds. And it was almost impossible to do prep for this show tonight. And then when I opened the podcast thread on Demonland, where our listeners do post questions and comments for the show, the first comment that I read was from Super Sub Shaki, formerly Clint Biscuit, who said, "I'll give this one a miss." Well, thank you, Clint. That really gave me the extra motivation to put this show together tonight. And then Jabroni added, "I don't know how you do it, Andy. Credit to you. I'd be tearing the studio apart right now." And you know what? It's taking every fibre of my being to front up to this mic tonight to bring our loyal listeners this post-mortem. And Denox adds, "Don't do it to yourself, lads. Make sure a large chunk is AFLW focused just for your mental health." And we will talk in depth later about the AFLW just to cleanse the palate after discussing this shit show. So, fellas, I'll start with you, George, and then we'll hear some more from Positive Binners if he wants. How are you feeling after Friday night's heartbreaking loss?
It was pretty bad, I can tell you, on Friday night and most of Saturday. I think the real way to get over it was to watch the girls playing on Sunday. That was fantastic. To watch a well-oiled and machine in operation compared to some of the disasters which unfolded on the Friday night. So yeah, I was completely shattered after the game. It was a game that should have been won. There were plenty of opportunities. We all know about those. Once again, the kicking in front of goal raised its ugly head. We've been talking about that for weeks, if not months. There's statistics coming out now which indicate this has been a problem for us all year, and certainly it's got worse all year. The reasons behind that, I still can't quite understand, but we'll have a chat about that and see if we can find a few reasons. Hopefully the coaches can, more importantly.
Yeah, I was shattered. I mean, interesting, the 5 stages of grief concept. I was thinking about it on the weekend because, I was wondering, I was so shattered that I was thinking, that this is kind of ridiculous being so impacted by a sporting event. But there it is. I love the club. I love Melbourne Footy Club. It's, I can't imagine supporting another football club. I certainly can't imagine supporting another team or anything similar to the level of passion and love I have for the club. And I was thinking about those 5 stages of grief. Definitely I'm still in denial. So using all my masculine skills to pretend it didn't happen. Acceptance, I got to acceptance pretty relatively quickly last year. It took a little while, but last year was a little bit different. But because we just ran out of gas, this year's, I still think we would have, if we win that game, I would have backed us to win this week, and I would have been still keen on us winning the flag. So it's completely different. I don't know whether I'll ever get to acceptance. Anger was interesting, though, because I've read a little bit of Demonland, and it's totally natural. There's a fair bit of anger there, but I can't feel anger. I mean, who do you feel anger at? You can't really feel anger at players doing their best and they don't perform. Like, they're our players. They're the players who wear the red and the blue. They're our players. And so I've always passionately believed you support our players and you support our coach and you support our team. Otherwise you're not a supporter. You're just someone who's throwing brickbats. So anger's a real challenge. But I think if there was a football 5 stages of grief, I'd be stuck between denial and heading towards frustration, because the overwhelming sensation was just frustration. It was the Pies game was the most incredibly frustrating game I've ever been to. This was even more frustrating. This took it up another level. And I was totally and utterly shattered when the siren went. I couldn't believe it. I felt like throwing up in the stands up there on level 2 in where I was sitting. So to be honest, I think the only time I've felt as shattered and I think real at a football match is the 87 prelim. I think I was thinking about it on the weekend. There's nothing else in between that comes close. Like, this is the closest I've felt to that day. I remember I was only a young fella, I think 17 or something in 87. And I was devastated, and I felt exactly the same way on Friday night. Like, I just couldn't, bring myself together. In 87, I was drinking. I'm glad I'm not drinking now, because I don't know, I probably would still be in the bottom of a bottle, I reckon, a few days later. So, I was completely and utterly devastated, still am. And it's going to, I don't know if I'll ever get to that acceptance stage.
I was 11 in 1987 and I cried like a baby, but I certainly wasn't drinking.
Well, I was 17 or 18, I think, so 19. So I think from memory, I smuggled in some bourbon, a little hip flask of Jim Beam, and it really helped the emotions flowing. So I didn't even have that excuse on Friday night, but the emotions were flowing, and I got the train home. I thought actually the Carlton crowd were pretty good, certainly compared to Carlton. I didn't see any carry on. No one gave me grief around me. And on the train home, people were just leaving me alone. Like, I must look like I'd just come from a funeral. And then speaking of funeral, of course, then the weekend comes around and Barras dies. So it was like a double hit. I still haven't even processed that. I haven't been able to watch yet the highlight reel or the tribute that they put together for him. And so it was just a terrible event. And God, this is how bad we feel. Imagine how bad the whole club feels and the players. And Viney afterwards was distraught, in the middle of the ground, and it was a bleak night, that's for sure.
Well, the comparison with 87 is very real, isn't it? That in both these games, we had it absolutely sewn up with a minute or two to go. And then it's grabbed from you right in front of you. And that's what's so distressing. And in a final like this.
And there's another comparison, George, actually, is, and I know at the risk of repeating myself, is the other comparison is the reason big reason we lost that game was our shit kicking in 87.
Yep.
And it was exactly the same on Friday night. Now, I've been talking about this for so long, it's ridiculous. But we have got, across the board, way below average standard AFL for kicking standard. And heard somewhere or other, which was pretty impressive, seeing I had a media blackout. But 3 of the bottom 7 kicks of players who have had more than 200 kicks over the season are Melbourne players, and they're Max, Gawn, Petrarca, and Oliver. Like they're our 3 highest paid players. Right, they're what we've built our foundation on. And I go back, an interesting decision was made. We talked about it. I can't remember if we've talked about it on the podcast, but certainly there was a lot of chat about it way back in the day on Demonland. One of the reasons I was furious that we got rid of Jack Watts, because I understand all the reasons why and the cultural stuff and yada, yada, yada. But my main concern was he was our best kick and we were getting rid of him. Just before that period, when Ruse was coach, we had the choice of it's gone completely. What's the Suns player? Kelly. It's Kelly, isn't it?
Kelly, yeah.
Kelly. So we could have taken Kelly and we traded up and we took Salem and Hunt. All right. And so for a long time, that whether, the value of that trade was in the balance, you could argue that we did all right out of it. Not anymore. You can't argue that, because, Hunt was a terrible kick and he's gone to West Coast. So we traded him out for a bag of peanuts. And Salo, who was one of our true elite kicks, has not been able to get on the park for 2 years and was was poor through these finals. And, so we've got very few elite kicks, Salo's being one of them. 2 years ago, you'd say he was our best kick. Not anymore. He's not getting depth, and they really went to work on Salem and to try to deny his influence. And so we really just haven't got enough kicks. You go back to that decision. Kelly is exactly the sort of player we need. And watching the Suns beat Port, is their kicking skills is what won them that game. That was the difference. They've almost got an identical game plan to us. And the difference between the two teams is, well, there's a few, but the number one difference is that they're kicking, and Kelly's kicking. I mean, Kelly beat us in a game this year because he could kick and we couldn't. Imagine we would have, it's hard to imagine we lose that game, for instance, on the weekend if you've got Kelly going at 70 to 80% disposal efficiency by foot. It's exactly what we needed. And the game is increasingly putting an emphasis on those elite kicks, and we desperately need some elite kicks into the side.
Let's get into some housekeeping. We didn't receive any 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts this week, so I don't have any to read out tonight, but I do want to thank all the listeners who did provide us with those 5-star reviews throughout the season. And for those who haven't, I only ask that if you do enjoy, if you've enjoyed this podcast over the year, if you could take a moment, write us a review. We'd really appreciate it, as it really does help boost the podcast and it helps get more listeners. If you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or Threads, you want to leave us feedback or post a comment or a question for the show, you can post under our podcast post each week, or you can slide into our DMs. We won't read out your full name on the show. And we did have actually 3 people. We had Victoria L says, great season of podcast team. Looking forward to a season review. Hopefully no hating and choking calls against a team who we matched evenly against all year. Some things ahead with a bit more experience to support the older blokes and freshening up the list, and that old window stays wide open. Go D's. Farina says, Monday vibes be like, and she's got sad faces emojis. It still really hurts. By the way, absolutely love the potty. Thanks for fronting up every week with your fantastic analysis all season. It's been a great elixir. And Cam on Instagram says, thanks for the great podcast this year. As a 57-year Melbourne fan and a new listener, it's refreshing listening to you guys. Just one point, could you please not bring up that expected score stat? I know Bim Man is so positive, but that is the worst thing to hear after a loss. Look forward to next year. Cheers and go D's. Well, we do have some questions later that mention that, so big man, hold off on any talk about that just yet.
Spoiler alert, I will be mentioning it.
All right, so Cam, you might want to hold on to your devices and not throw them out the window. In addition to being available on Apple, Google, Spotify, SoundCloud, and all your preferred podcasting apps, the Demonland podcast is available on YouTube. You can watch us. You can watch our cartoon likenesses while we're talking. Just search for Demonland Podcast to find our channel on YouTube. If you want to chat with other Demon fans and you've never been to our forum at Demonland, head on over to demonland.com. You can sign up, chat with other Demon fans from across Australia and around the world. It's completely free. You can post questions or comments for the show, and you can also talk to other Demon fans about lots of topics and threads discussing all things Demons related. So join up and join in on the conversation. We've now officially, as we're now officially in the post-season period, this is the best time of year to be on Demonland, the yearly sub-forum with all the trade and draft talk and rumours. It's open now. We've got a number of posters on Demonland who were supposedly in the know. They've got some proven track records. You just got to know who to listen to. So get on Demonland, get the inside word on the trade period and the draft. And if there is any silver lining to going out in straight sets, it's that we actually improved our draft hand by officially finishing 6th. Yay. As it currently stands, we have pick 5, 13, 24, and 32, and we're going to be front and centre in this year's trade and draft period. I've got full faith in Tim Lamb and Jason Taylor being able to maximise our hand on draft night. It's the most wonderful time of the year to be on Demonland, so don't miss a minute. If you'd like to join us on the air tonight to talk about any of the topics we're going to talk about, then please give us a call on 0390163666. That's 0390163666. I'll answer, I'll put you on mute, and I'll bring you on when there's a break in the conversation. If you're listening to us live now, head on over to demonland.com/podcast. You can join us in the chat room. I won't mention that we're live every Monday night because we're not going to be for the next couple of weeks. So tonight we'll do our post-mortem of the Blues game, followed by talk of our fabulous AFLW team, who are now 3-0 to start the season. They're in sensational form in the coming weeks, and I'm not sure when at this stage. We'll wait for the dust to settle a bit. We'll do our annual season review, where we'll dissect what went right and what went wrong. We'll review some of our pre-season predictions, and we'll look ahead to see what we need to do in 2024 to get us back in premiership contention. And then later in the year, most likely post-draft, I'll see if I can have a chat with MFC recruitment manager Jason Taylor again for our annual chat about the trade and draft period. So stay tuned for that. You can look on demonland.com when those are going to be live. Now, I couldn't bring myself to write up a match review this week. It'd just be too painful. I was going to just read out George's excellent match report that he writes each week, but that would be too agonising as well. And I know it took George an extra day or two to submit his review this week, which is totally understandable. George usually has his match reports in before the final siren has even sounded. Win, lose or draw. If you need a refresher, head on over to demonland.com. You'll find George's match report. You can read it while you self-flagellate. Now, before we get into listener questions, as B-Man mentioned earlier, we did lose. The club lost one of its most iconic people that's ever been involved with the club. Supreme Demon says, firstly, what a horrible past few days for the Melbourne Football Club, losing to Carlton by 2 points in the semi-final, and then the great Ronald Dale Barassi passing away. I would like to hear a tribute to Ronald Dale Barassi and perhaps some fond memories of him. So I'm going to I wrote a little bit of a tribute today. So Ronald Dale Barassi Jr. is a name synonymous with passion, dedication, and an unwavering commitment to Australian rules football. He has left an indelible mark on the sport, his community, and the hearts of countless individuals. Born the 27th of February 1936, he was the son of Melbourne player Ronald Barassi Sr., who died at Tobruk in World War II when Ron was only 6 years of age. Ron followed in his father's footsteps, debuting for the D's in round 1 of 1953 and played 204 games and kicked 295 goals for the club, winning 6 premierships with the D's along the way. He captained the club from 1960 until his departure at the end of 1964. He ended his playing career at the Blues as captain coach, playing a further 50 games and kicking 35 goals for a total of 254 games and 330 goals. In 1973, he took the reins as coach of the Kangaroos, where he coached them for 8 seasons, including 2 premierships. In 1981, he came back home to the Demons, coaching them for 5 seasons with very little success, but his tenure may have helped revive the club, who would 2 years later return to finals after a 23-year absence, which began when he first left the club in 1964. From 1993 to 1995, he coached the Swans before stepping away from the game, but he always remained a Demon at heart, and up until this year was a permanent fixture in the Legends area at Demons games. As a player, he embodied the very essence of Australian rules football: fierce determination, courage in the face of adversity, and an unmatched work ethic. He was not just a legend of the game, he was a role model, a mentor, and a source of inspiration for generations. Ron Barassi leaves behind an enduring legacy. His impact on footy transcends the sport itself. He will be forever remembered as an icon, a trailblazer, and a beloved figure who brought joy to the hearts of many. Ron Barassi Jr. was a giant among giants. His dedication to the game, his unwavering spirit, and his boundless love for his community and the sport will continue to inspire future generations. Many were privileged to have witnessed his greatness, and for my generation, we were honoured to have heard the stories of the golden era of the D's that he helped shape. His memory will forever live on in our hearts. Vale Ronald Dale Barassi. Do you guys have any memories of Ron you want to share, or just anything you want to say, George? You can start.
I think we're all considerably younger than Ron. That's why we were able to do this. I can remember when I was a young boy, some old chap who lived next door to us, he was actually the doorman at the Melbourne Football Club. And so he was able to take a very young George in after training to meet the team, and including meeting the absolute god of the era, Ron Barassi. So I got to shake his hand when I was just a wee boy. But to this day, the most amazing thing was, I remember Ron came in, he's after training, he was basically naked except for a jockstrap. Now, I can't describe a jockstrap to anybody these days, but it's been implanted in my brain to this day about here's this absolute god wearing this single strip of I don't know what to hold his vitals together. But anyhow,
Where were you, George? What club did you say?
Yeah, this went to the next door neighbour was the doorman for the club, so I went.
At the footy club, not at a nightclub.
No.
that would be a story, George. Both for a couple of reasons.
Breaking news.
Yeah. Anyhow, the amazing thing about Ron Barassi is his ability to push the game forward. When he started at Melbourne, we were coming off some pretty lean years. When he came back to Melbourne in the 80s, we were an absolute basket case of a club, and yet he was around for a while and developed and got the culture right, got the players in who needed to perform, and I think John Northey was the beneficiary of that. When he went to North Melbourne had never won a premiership. They were a complete and utter basket case. He was able to take full advantage of the 10-year rule at that stage, and they won their first premiership as a result. When he went back to Sydney in the 1990s, it was the same story. Sydney were an absolute basket case, and he was there, I think, only for 2 years, but a year after he left, Sydney were playing finals. So he was able to take 3 clubs at least from the absolute depths to finals football and premierships, simply because he understood what was necessary to run a football club. So he was fantastic. He was a visionary. He could see where football needed to go. He was very supportive of moving into the Sydney market because he knew that the AFL needed to get beyond just its Melbourne base effectively. And even the expansion into interstate clubs, you can always trace it back to Ron Barassi and what he was able to push to get the game itself forward. So, yeah, he is a genuine classic legend and icon of the game. He'll be sadly missed by the Melbourne Football Club, but also every club that he's had an association with.
Absolutely. One of the best things about the 21 flag was the idea that there was a flag for Barassi, and it's obviously another layer to the loss, and obviously for his loss that we weren't able to get it done for him in Melbourne last year, and not this year either. So one of my favourite periods of barracking for Melbourne actually was when he was coach, and even though we were terrible during it, and the best that probably could be said is, as you say, George, he really did change the sort of attitude of the club. And I remember I went to training one time, which there were periods where we would train at the MCG, and I watched us train at the MCG, and he was coach, and you could hear him bellowing from the middle of the MCG. There was basically no one else there, just me sitting behind the goals and with a mate, and he was incredibly loud and quite direct in his coaching techniques, and it certainly came from a different period, didn't he? But there's the famous footage. Was it Shane Zantuck that he was barreling in that clip? Where
give me possessions and I'll shut up.
Yeah, that was. And if anyone is interested in Barras, there's a kicking around on YouTube. There's a I don't know if it's a movie or it was a documentary, and I think it was sponsored by whoever was the cigarette sponsor for North Melbourne back in the day. And that it's the 77, I think or it could be 76 season, pre-season training down, and it follows them right through, I think, up to maybe the third game or something. And it's fascinating as a time capsule, but it's Ronald Dale Barassi in full pomp, barreling his players. And I remember, I forget was it Brightus? Was that Arnold Brightus who came to Melbourne? Like just going through him like a dose of salts, but his ability to motivate that team, who were a real struggle. You know, they, as you say, George, they were in struggle town, the Roos, when he took over, weren't they? You know, went on to win the 77 flag and 70, got beaten in 78, I think, did they? So, yeah, a giant of the game. You know, the giant of the game, really, isn't it? And to be honest, you know, I haven't even, like, with the loss on Friday night, I haven't really sort of given him his loss, the loss of Barras, the attention it deserves. And so I'll turn my mind to that this week a little bit and watch those, watch some of the tributes that are online. And I think the AFL did a tribute that was during, you know, they were going to show it during the halftime. I'm not sure if they did, of the one of the semi-finals.
I think they did something pre-game that was on the scoreboard.
Yeah.
What do you think about whether they should rename the Premiership Cup the Ron Barassi Cup or something of the like? I think that's been touted.
I haven't given it any thought. I mean, it'd be great to honour him some way because, you know, the other thing I think that's probably relevant for footy lovers is that he revolutionised footy in some respects. Like, I think you know, he was professional before there was professional, if that makes sense. His dedication to training and fitness was legendary. His sort of approach to winning was legendary. And, of course, it was at the 71 grand final where he exhorted his players, the Blues, to handball at halftime. And, you know, maybe that's apocryphal sort of tale about the shift in footy, but so the story goes is that, you know, that was the birth of modern AFL footy, that halftime speech, in terms of changing the way the game is played and some of the key tactics and use of handball. So, you know, leaving aside what he means for Melbourne, it's hard to imagine AFL football looking like it does now if not for Barras. And there's few players. You know, there's probably, I can't even think of anyone else, maybe Polly Farmer in terms of the way he revolutionised ruck and, you know, that could even put a candle to him in terms of his influence on what the game looks like.
Yep, certainly an icon of the game, and yeah, he will be missed. Used to sit near where I currently sit at the footy and didn't see him at all this year, and he was there sort of last couple of years. He's always sort of been a permanent fixture, and he wasn't there this year, so I sort of thought maybe something was up, but I haven't heard anything, and yeah, that came as a bit of a shock anyway. Let's move on. I forgot about our stats files, so before we get into listener questions, let's get into your stats files.
So I want to thank Willow Ratings for putting these stats up all year. It's been my go-to. I haven't done any analysis of this game at all, and I've looked at these stats, but that's it. So my analysis is pretty thin. Other than just before I'll go through the stats, the key stats. I'll preface these comments by I have the only footy media I've read is Demonland, and there's a lot of talk, as there has been really right through Goody's tenure, about the game plan and its relationship to our scoring. And I just think it's a bit of a nonsense, to be honest, to be perfectly frank. It really is. I talked about it last week, is that the number one reason we lost that game against the Pies was accuracy. I would say it's the number two reason this week, and we'll get into in the listener questions a bit later about what the number one reason might be. But just in terms of the game, the reason why I wanted to talk about the game plan is that I talked about last week. It actually, that first quarter looked like how I thought it might look in terms of us being more aggressive. And we clearly, it wasn't really captured. Not that I saw on Demonland in any case. I'm not sure what the media have said about this. But we definitely came in with a plan to spread the ball, and we definitely came in with a plan of moving it quicker, and we did successfully move it quicker. And the way we played this game was notably different from the way we played against the Pies. And as we go through some of these stats, it will reflect the difference. And I just wanted to, the reason I'm raising that is to follow on from my point about that I made last week about the Swans. You know, people say, well, you know, the cause of our inefficiency to score is partly related to our game plan, which I just don't think is the case. For me, it's accuracy number one, accuracy number two, and maybe the absence of a forward who can lead into the right spots number three. I just think this idea that we're not delivering it inside as well as we could is overplayed. But in this game, we actually looked to move the ball quicker, and it was the Blues who played the Melbourne game plan. And we'll talk about game plans a little bit later, but I wanted to preface the look at the stats with that in mind. The point being is that we played differently and had the same result. And the common thread between this game and the Pies game wasn't the game plan. We actually played differently. It was our inaccuracy. And so we had plenty of shots at goal. The method was fine. Our method is fine. It's our inability to execute, which is not fine. So key stats. Picking one out right from the get-go is our kicking efficiency was 57.9. Theirs was 65.4. All right, they're not one of the best kicking teams in the AFL. They still went 7.5% better by foot than us. Really that was a big factor. Our metres gain was really interesting. This goes to my point about the different game plans. They had 213 more metres gains. And I'm not sure how often that would have happened this year, but that was not a function of us not being competitive. That was a function of the tweak to our game plan, coming up against a team who is as focused on us as territory. Similarly, reflected in the same thing, I think it was, 32 more inside 50s last week against the Pies? This week, they had one more inside 50. Now, again, that wasn't an indication of them dominating us. Quite the contrary. It's evidence of the different approach we took to this game to address some of the issues that we had against the Pies, in particular to avoid having a crowded forward line all the time. So we weren't crowded inside 50 nowhere near as much as we were, because basically the inside 50s were equal, 53 to 52. We were only +1. We had 7 more shots at goal, so we were more efficient than them. We were efficient. That's the point. So we had 28 shots to goal to their 21 shots at goal. We were more efficient than our opposition. It's just that they kicked goals and we didn't kick goals. So I don't want to hear about our efficiency. We were efficient enough. So we had 12.4 more shots per inside 50. So picking up that same point, efficiency wasn't the issue. Now, sure, you could say, well, the way we enter means we have more difficult shots. It just doesn't hold up in this game. We missed some absolute howlers, and they didn't. Contested possessions is a huge number for us. Obviously, we were +16, which was really impressive, and it was pretty consistent right through the game. One of the interesting things watching live, I think a key period in the time for Carlton's ability to stay in that match was the last 10 minutes of the first quarter. It was really noticeable. They lifted their ratings and got back into it. We really needed to take advantage in that first 20 minutes. We needed to get to that 3-goal margin that I've talked about a few times. We needed to get out to 20 points. Then the game would have looked different, and that was on us. We had the opportunities to do that, and we had the opportunity in the first quarter to do that, and they got right back into that game in the end of the first quarter. Ground ball gets, we were +24 now for ground ball gets, which is massive, massive. So we came to the party. That's been a stat for us. Last year, that was a horror show for us, ground ball gets. I'm not sure where we are ranked in the AFL, but I think we're top 5 ground ball gets, but we smashed them. They are like one of the best teams in the AFL at ground ball gets, and we smashed them in that. This one was critical. Intercepts, we had 8 more intercepts when we're an intercept team. Much better than them, but they did a good job, +8 and much better than them in the AFL rankings. So we did the work on intercepts. Our backline worked effectively. Intercept marks, we had 5 more intercept marks than them. So again, our intercept game and our pressure was fine. Centre clearances was an interesting one, and this might come up a bit later in terms of the conversation, but we were -5 in centre clearances, and I think that really hurt. And that was a bit of a theme, I think, in the last sort of 6 or 7 weeks. We gave up right back to the Hawthorn game where we gave up, I think, 2 goals, maybe 3 goals in the first 3 minutes of the third quarter of that game. Similarly, against Collingwood, we gave up a couple of goals out of the centre, and they really hurt, and we gave up some goals from centre clearances as well. In this game, stoppage clearances, though, we were +8. So we were +8, and that's really important in terms of that's their one wood. Carlton's one wood is winning stoppages, and our one wood is winning turnovers and scoring from turnovers. Their main scoring source all season has been scoring from stoppages. We had 8 more stoppage wins than them, +3 for contested marks. We took more marks inside 50. Interestingly, we only had 9 more hitouts, which I think was an interesting factor. It feeds into the Grundy discussion, feeds into the Shackey discussion. Maxi didn't have a great night, it really has to be said. And certainly we didn't have an advantage in the ruck that we otherwise would have. Hit-outs to advantage. We had 1 less hit-out to advantage than them. We only had 7 hit-outs to advantage for the night, and they had 8. Tackles was interesting. I was actually really surprised with this number. They had 15 more tackles than us. I thought that was interesting, and credit to them for the tackling. We had 10 tackles inside 50. That's another positive. So heaps of positives there. We only lost 18% of our defensive one-on-one losses. They lost 27, so nearly a quarter of their. So we really didn't take advantage of how many times we beat them one-on-one in our forward line. Pressure was really interesting. The overall pressure was 178. That's a 189. So that was really interesting, way down on our previous encounter against them. That's somewhat to do with the way we decided to play this game, which was use the width, run, create space. The first quarter was 187 to 195. 172 to 204 in the second quarter really surprised me. So they really came to play in terms of their chasing and corralling and pressure that they applied, the Blues, that is. The third quarter was really where I think, lost the game, where we should have put the game to bed. And, Maxi's miss in that third quarter was, I think, this just deciding moment. He should have got a free kick before that. Was right below me. And then that's why he was so grumpy when he got the mark and threw Pitt and Ed away. But to not kick that goal was a heartbreak. I think that would have put us 15 points up or something like that. In the third quarter, it was 168 to only 158 by them. That's really, really low. I have to say I'm super impressed with both teams. 187, but they were 196 in the last quarter. You can't take anything away from the Blues in their, desire to stay in that match. We left the door open, and credit to them. They took their chances. That Motlop goal was right below me, and it was the classy finish, wasn't it? Points. Once again, our top pressure player was Oliver. Nibbler was second, both well above their season average. Tommy Sparrow was third. Salo was fourth. I think he didn't have a great game, but he was fourth on our pressure. Charlie Spargo, I thought, had a great, not a great game, had a good game, and really I think there's some questions about why he wasn't brought in previous, but he was our our fifth. And then Jack Viney, who was down. He had 38 pressure points and he averages 54. So that's really down. You go right down to the bottom, and some of our sort of mid-rung players. Cozzy had a way down on his normal. He only had 12 pressure acts, 22 pressure points, and that was below his season average of 44. So that's almost half his season average for pressure, which was, I have to say, really disappointing. The other one that I just on the pressure was interesting was Trent Rivers. Only had 12 pressure acts below his season average for pressure too, and they really went to work on Trent Rivers, both the Pies and the Blues. I thought that was really clever coaching. Really negated his influence. I thought was really crucial because Salem didn't fill the gap. That was a problem. So we struggled with two of our key defenders not really contributing a huge amount. Time in forward half was fascinating. And again, this goes to my point about the way we decided to play this game. We didn't play it like we normally do. We tried to get it in transition. We tried to make it more of a transition, open run game. In the first quarter where we dominated, they had 55% of the ball in their half to 44%. And that's indicative of the way we set up. Didn't press up as much as we did previously against them. That was 47-53. Third quarter, we started to dominate that match and it reflected in our forward half and it started to look more like a Melbourne match, 63-37. The last quarter was 59-41 for an overall split for the game was 55-45. And that's how we want it to look if we're going to be able to score. We had plenty of opportunities to score. It wasn't the method. It was in our accuracy. Score summary, this is really important, I think, in terms of thinking about this match. As I said, the Blues one-wood is their number one in the AFL, I think, or number two score from stoppages. And this was their point of difference. Their one-wood against every other team is their scores from stoppages. They only scored 15 points from stoppages, there's 12 points from stoppages. We scored 15 more points from stoppages, 27 points to 12. So they could only manage 2 goals, no points from stoppage. This is the critical one, though. Our one-wood. Their one-wood is scoring from stoppages. Our one-wood is scoring from turnover. They beat us in scores from turnover by 5. It's unbelievable. But the reason they beat us, they had 12 scoring shots on turnover, 6-6 for 42. We had 17 shots on turnover. So our game was working fine. We played game exactly the way Goody would have wrote it up in his mind, I'm sure. So we had 17 scoring shots from turnover, but could only manage 4 goals 13. That's 4 goals 13 from turnover for only 37 points, and our season average is 51 points. So again, for the second week in a row, I think it was 25 points from turnover last week. We should have got above our season average of 51 this a Friday gone, and we certainly would have. Imagine if we'd kicked 13-4, we would have won that game by 15, 20 points, which is the expected score. 21 points was the expected score. So the other one was interesting was centre bounce attendances. Maxi was 96% of the time. 88%. Clayton Oliver was at 96% of all centre bounce attendances, which is massive. Track was only 54%. 54% was which I thought was low. And Sparrow 46%. Maxi, maybe I'm being a bit tough on Maxi. Did have a broken foot. He had. He didn't have the domination in terms of the hit-outs. He only had 6 hit-outs to advantage from 36 in total, which is about his season average. And then the final one was expected score, 82-61. So 21 points there on expected score. Now, just on the expected score, I know it's going to come up in the questions about it. David King made a really interesting point, and I think a really good one about expected score in the lead up to the game. So just a reminder that the way they define that is that every shot on goal is analysed based on where on the ground it was taken, how much pressure the player was under against all players who have had a shot from that same position over the last decade of football. So in a way, it's an average of all players. And what David King said, which I 100% agree with, is there should be an asterisk for Melbourne. There should be a weighted expected score for Melbourne. So that is how we... that's what average AFL teams would win that match by 21 points. Our score would have been 81 points. For me, I think it's a really good point by David King, because what it speaks to is we are in a below average kicking team. It's as simple as that. And so, whatever method that we're going to get, if we're going to only be going at 56, 57% by foot, whatever the method that we employ, we are going to struggle to beat the teams with better kicks. I think it's becoming more and more critical. So, that's to be I think to David King's point, if you had a weighted thing on just Melbourne, that expected score would be about the right expected score, such as our poor kicking, for a decade or more. On every measure, we should have won that game. We didn't win the game, not just because we didn't kick accurately, though. I think, for me, again, we'll get into this in more detail, but for me, probably the most frustrating and the most disappointing was that even though we were inaccurate, we should have won that game in the last 5 minutes. We just did not maintain our composure, which was really unlike Melbourne. Even with our weight of numbers, even with missing those scores, we still should have held on in that last 90 seconds to win that game.
You've just brought back all these memories, everything, all the things that I avoided have just been hit all at once. So thank you for that, Bin Man. Let's get into our listener questions. Demon Eyes asks, losing to Collingwood and then Carlton in successive weeks in finals, does it get any worse than that? And Daniel E2 88 simply says no. And I would have to agree with no, it does not. It simply does not get any worse. RPFC says, we have a forward line built around maximising our defence. What is the point of having a Jaguar of a backline and a Rolls Royce of a midfield if you have to almost sacrifice a third of the game when you have the ball to protect the Jag? We leave ourselves open to good teams getting us on the break as our entries are shallow to non-forwards and or delayed, so in traffic. If one of you brings up expected score without using a lamenting tone, I am going to unfollow. Don't tell me we should have won and not too much is wrong. Just isn't true. Demon WA replied, we could/should have won for the last 2 weeks. Hindsight says injuries to Brayshaw, Petty and Melksham cost us. You can pretend a lot is wrong, but the reality is fine margins decide finals, and we are % off with personnel and % off with polish. RFPC responds to Demon WA saying, I think that's a trap. We are never going to be out of a final with our personnel and their strength in the contest. But what is the point of that if you can't maximise dominance in territory? Can't maximise dominance in forward entries? The game is becoming more about doing well with the time that is given to you, and we are not built for that in how we move the ball from defence and also who is there to maximise in the forward line. Weber chimes in saying, our movement from defence is elite, league standard. Our forward line was as disrupted by injury as 2019, and that's saying something. Petty, JVR, Fritsch, Melk available and together all season, along with our best smalls, Cos and Chandler, and Clary in the middle all season to free track forward, and we win this year's flag. That was never close to happening, sadly. It's that simple. RFPC replies, is that what the stats say? How can you have that opinion? We move it sideways before the corridor. We move it slow by foot as opposed to quick by hands. You're right about our disrupted forward personnel, but I think changes are on the horizon. And Weber responds with, there will always be changes, of course. That's the nature of footy. But we were/are so obviously so close. It's crazy. Kick straighter, we win. It's that simple and that close. I don't understand how people can't see this. That's what makes it so frustrating. And yes, RFPC, our back half turnover and transition to score has been elite all season statistically. It's not really an opinion. And finally, at the break of Gorn says, I know B-Man will bang on about how accuracy cost us, and it's true, but do you think the footy department needs to rebalance our contest/defence mantra? We averaged something like 65 points the last 5 weeks. Surely 2024 has to be a focus on scoring. And we've got a voicemail from 13th Flag. The 13th Flag is coming.
Good evening, Demonland. 13th Flag is coming here. Yes, I know I need to update my username, but for some reason I just can't until we win one at the MCG. First time, long time, super long time. Love the podcast and the forum for years. Have to ask this question: do you feel like I feel that there is a stubbornness and almost an arrogance to Simon Goodwin and the contest and defence philosophy that we have? And also, and this might sound a bit controversial, do you think there's a bit of arrogance and almost stubbornness from our captain in regards to how Grundy could have been used throughout the year? I don't know. I just felt that with everything that happened on the night, the discussion around his toe, we had an All-Australian superstar who basically couldn't get a game. I won't talk about the game itself because I'll leave that to the experts in yourselves. But do you feel that the stubbornness and inflexibility, both from a ruck perspective and also from a gameplay perspective, will really jeopardise our chances in the next 2 years? Because I believe that's how long we have left with this current team before we have to regenerate. Love to hear your thoughts. Can't wait to hear the podcast. Go D's! 2024 MCG. You got to believe.
Well, destiny was last week. So, big man, can you answer this one without bringing up expected score or placating the masses by telling them that we're not that far off?
Well, I can, but I mean, the idea that, one, RP, obviously I'm in a grumpy mood tonight, but RPFC, that's just flat out wrong. We are the best team outside in terms of scoring from transition. As I just said, we are number one in the AFL from scoring from turnover, number one in the AFL. And this idea that we've got our defense and offense balance out of whack is just so wrong. Just don't worry about don't look at the score, look at the scoring shots. So in the scoring shots, we have had more scoring shots than any of our competitors except for Brisbane in the last, during the finals, except for, the Giants as well. If you look, the game plan, I find it such a curious thing because the game plan that Melbourne employ is the game plan that all the contenders are now using. You look at what Collingwood are doing. So everyone talks about their transition off the half-back flank, but has anyone been watching them for the last 6 weeks? They have stopped playing that way. They are playing forward half territory football that is completely and utterly based on high pressure and contest, just like Melbourne. The Giants, their model is exactly our model. Exactly our model. The difference is they've got elite kicks kicking inside 50. And they've got a forward who's a natural forward at the moment. One of the biggest problems for us in terms of, kicking the ball inside 50 is we haven't got a natural leading forward who's got leading patterns. I mean, that was why Grundy didn't cut it because he couldn't as a forward, that is, because he couldn't work out those patterns. But watching the Giants, I kept saying the Suns, the Giants play Port I just could not help. I don't know what you boys thought is. I thought, we need Hogan back. Hogan led into space, into small spaces. He timed his leads so well. And so we clearly, it was a massive problem losing Melksham. As it turned out, Melksham was probably the biggest loss, I would say bigger than Gus in some respects, because he would have taken a couple of his chances, but also he would have minimised the influence of Wiedering. He would have done a better job at taking advantage. He would have led into the right spots. He's a natural forward. We really lacked a natural forward target. But the key thing really is our accuracy. Like I don't know which of the posters said talked about that, but every team is playing now basically the same game plan. The only difference is that the Lions have got a little bit more control. They still high pressure. They still look to get it into the forward half, and they've got a dominant forward line. So, they've got the key forwards up there. They are moving it a bit quicker. Generally, they always have, and they use short kicks a lot more. Carlton basically have got our game plan full stop. As I said, the Pies have changed their game plan. No one's talking about it, it would appear to me, but they're no longer the dangerous transition team off the half-back flank because the game has become basically the template that Hardwick put in place in 2017. Every team is following the same template. So we can talk about Melbourne's game plan. We can be frustrated with the Melbourne game plan, but it is the game plan that all contenders are using, give or take a few tweaks. It is the way that premierships are won at the moment. Football at the moment, I think, is this incredible combination of intensity, pressure, tackling numbers are through the roof. These finals, are crazy in terms of, the lack of time and space that players have. And so the sort of catch-22 or the change that I think that's happening in the footy at the same time is how critical now good ball users are. And that was the difference in the game, Port versus the Giants, was the real difference in that game was how well the Giants used the ball by foot. The real difference in our game against the Pies was how well the Pies used the ball by foot. And the real difference in this game, the one that we're talking about, the Blues, was the Blues' accuracy for goal, like that goal Motlop kick. We couldn't buy a kick like that. We couldn't kick them from 15 metres out. I mean, Maxi Gawn, you talk about inside. He missed from 15 metres out on an angle and then inexplicably goes for a banana from even closer. He doesn't walk around like every other AFL player does and kick around on his left foot. I mean, that's not a difficult shot from, 40, 50 metres out on an angle because we've got a poor entry. That's just a flat out bad miss. It doesn't wash with me, this idea that it's our game plan is the issue. The issue is our kicking skills, pure and simple.
I've got a little bit to add, if that's all right, Andy.
Yeah, of course.
Along the same lines, I did some analysis of we saw in the media today. I think people mentioning that we've got 3 of the worst kicks in the AFL in the top 7. And I think that's pretty well right. What was interesting to me was those 3 are all in our midfield. So that caused me to have a look, and I was mentioned in the in my report. After 7 games, we were kicking, and this is purely on kicks for goals, in goals and behinds. It doesn't include misses, complete misses. So these numbers are actually better than what they are in reality. After 7 rounds, we were running at 69% goals to behinds. By the end of the season, we're down to 45%. In the finals, we're down to 36%. But the reason I then thought, where are the problem areas? And in fact, the problem areas isn't at the forward line. We've got some very good kicks in the forward line. JVR, 28-9 for the season. Petty, 12 goals, 1. Chandler, 24-13. Melcham, 20 goals, 11. Joel Smith, in his few games, 11 goals, 4. Fritsch, 38 goals, 25. They're all getting good numbers. The problem lies with Petrarca in particular, 28 goals, 34. Langdon, 6 goals, 10. Gawn, 10 goals, 14. The problem is up the field more than we've got people who are midfielders are the poor kicks. It's not the forwards that are poor kicks for goals. It's a completely different, and we're depending on these midfielders to kick the goals because our good kicking forwards weren't there.
And our game plan, George, I mean, that scoring from transition is scoring from general play. You're going to get more goals from general play than you are at shots every single day of the week. Just think, again, going back to that Motlop goal, I know he's a small forward, not a mid, but if that was track running into goal, you would just give him no chance of kicking that. I mean, the goal that he did kick from that angle was almost because he stuffed it up and had no time to think, wasn't it?
It was exactly, he had no time to think.
And it was interesting looking at overall through the season, because we went from nearly 70% down to 36%. We virtually halved in the space of the season our accuracy because we progressively lost our good kicks for goal, and we were depending on other people to try and get the scores. When you look at Brisbane, for example, who don't have any injuries, their mids rarely kick a goal. Lockie Neal's kicked 3 goals for the year. Zorko 8, Ashcroft 8. McInerney 7. They don't depend on them to kick goals. They've got Hipwood and Danaher. Danaher 56 goals, 35. Hipwood 40 goals, 27. They're getting the ball through the big sticks because their major forwards are still there. Ours aren't. We were missing the Melchams. We were missing the Ben Browns.
And Ben Brown's a big one, I reckon, because he straightens us up. He takes his chances. Yeah. He's got good leading patterns.
Yeah. So to suggest that the problem lies with our forward line. The problem doesn't lie with our forward line. The problem lies, unfortunately, with our midfielders who are just poor kicks.
And then on top of that, George, is so poor kick for goals. And then, the talk about our inefficiency going inside 50, again, it's just shit kicking.
Yeah.
So our best kick inside 50 this season, for the last 6 weeks, is Nibbler. Our worst 2 kicks inside 50, our worst 3 kicks inside 50, this was ahead of after the Pies game, were Brayshaw, Petrarca and Oliver. They're our 3 A-grade midfielders, It's not just their poor kicking inside 50. As I talked about last week, it's failing to kick to the forwards' advantage. And feeding, this game was so frustrating. Feeding the opposition intercept marks isn't so much a failure of game plan, it's a failure of inability to kick at AFL average standard. And it's a big problem for us. I mean, our best players can't kick. It can't be relied on to get set shots and miss too many kicks, field kicks, essentially.
Yeah, which is the real pity because people like Petrarca and Gawn as well, that we've identified in the past, the failures in their kicking technique. It's blindingly obvious and nothing seems to have been done about it. They're the people who we're depending on to kick goals and win us matches, and nothing's improved in their kicking.
Yeah, but I don't think you can fix that. I don't think that's.
Well, you can improve technique a little bit, but that's what I keep saying. It's like the golf analogy: is poor technique gets exposed by pressure.
It's probably easier to fix the set shot stuff because there isn't that pressure of being in game. But I think that type of stuff is so ingrained in a player that in the heat of the moment, I don't think you can.
No, exactly.
Fix that.
That's why I go back to the decision not to recruit Kelly. He was I just was so keen to get him because, one, I love left footers, but his number one draft thing, in the information, was that he was an elite kick, and everything he's done since is shown that he's an elite kick. And there was a period of time where he was still an elite kick and getting high numbers, but people were knocking him. But now, that sort of cream, like Goulden, for instance, you need all of the players to contest. You need all of that, but then you need players like Goulden or Kelly who can hit 80%, 90%. That's been the different. That's what Collingwood have over us, is that they've got 4 players. I didn't mention last week. I forgot to mention Sidebottom gave Langdon a bath last week, and one of them was he kept Langdon. One of the reasons was he kept Langdon quiet, but every possession Sidebottom got hurt us. Every single time he kicked the ball, he hurt us. Whereas, Langers goes at 50% hurt, doesn't he? So, like I said, we're only kicked in on a perfect night. There were no excuses in this game weather-wise. There was no wind. There was it was dry. It wasn't even humid. It wasn't even dewy, I should say. And we went at 57% by foot. That's just not going to cut it in AFL finals.
But I think there is certain things certainly in Petrarca and Gawn's kicking for goal from set shots that can be improved. Yeah. The first thing I'd do is say, stop spinning the ball in your hands.
Well, Maxi, I mean, to be fair to Track, he has improved his set shots, but not his field kicking has improved.
No. And the second one for Max would be, do not run out on an arc.
Yeah. To what? For what reason? He can get the distance, But also, from the those 2 set shots, the set shot and then the banana, his brain was all over. I don't know what he was thinking with going for a banana from that distance.
Anyhow, we'll move on from that.
So 30 minutes after saying he would be giving this podcast a miss, super sub Shaki says, was good to see Tomlinson play well and have the ability to free up Lever and May. What says, given the expectation is that Petty will have to play forward in 2024 to give us a semblance of a forward target, what will the defensive structure look like? Do you expect Rivers to move into the midfield to provide some drives with the legs away from the contest? How do we combat our lack of speed on the spread? Why do we continue to do this to ourselves? Thank you, Demonland, Binman and George, for everything you've done for the AFLM season. On to bigger things with the AFLW. George, can we finally conclude that the 3 tools in defence, or whatever makeup that may be in the future, is what we need going forward? And what do you think about our defensive structure will look like in 2024?
You probably gather that I'm not a fan of Tomlinson, and the first 2 goals for Carlton proved that again this week. So I'll leave it at that. you've got to bring more than just being tall. You've got to be mobile, and you've got to be able to read the play as well. I thought Turner would have been a far better option for this week, even though De Koning was tall, but De Koning wasn't getting his possession simply because he was tall. So I think Turner's going to be the more positive inclusion for the next year because he simply reads the play so much better than what Tomlinson will. May in this game was just superb. Absolutely. He saved us.
Awesome, wasn't he?
He saved us on at least certain goals. It was down to Stephen May marks this or we're dead. He was fantastic. And that released Lever as well. Lever was doing what Lever does to the best of his ability. I'm not worried about the defensive lines. We've got the options. What we've got to be careful, Lever's a good age. What we've got to be careful of is who replaces Stephen May in a couple of years. He's on the wrong side of 30 from here on in. But Tomlinson's already 29. I don't think there's much future in Tomlinson, is what I'm saying. So,
did I say we've re-signed him, Andy?
There was
given an contract extension, or
I don't think anything's officially been announced. But
there was a rumor on Demon Land that he'd been offered a further extension,
right?
And it wouldn't be surprising simply because he's a good backup. And that's about the limit of it. Yeah,
but, I mean, he had a reasonable game, but he didn't.
But he let De Koning off in the first quarter. In the first play, and then he pushed him flat in the back and gave De Koning the second goal. So at the end of the game, it's decided by 2 points.
Yeah, and he didn't. I mean, when I say he had an okay game, just looking at the player ratings from Wheelo, he was our second to last rated player behind Josh Shackins.
Yeah.
Oh no, sorry, that's Tom McDonald. He was our third. He was our fourth least most. I had 3.3 points for the match in terms of player rating. Chandler only had 2.8. Tommy McDonald had 0.7. So he was, and Shacky didn't have anything because he didn't get on the ground. So, and then JJ was right down the bottom. So our bottom 6 players were, in terms of ratings for this match, let's say our bottom 7, Fritsch, Spargo, Sparrow, Jordan, Tomo, Chandler and McDonald. And Bowie, Salo was, up there in that bottom 10 as well. So, there are a lot of good players had not great nights.
Monoculus says, Andy, Big Man George, I, for one, really appreciate your hard work and positivity, even in a gut-wrenching loss like tonight. I've followed the D since the early 1950s, so enjoyed the glory years and missed through work and travel the late 60s, 70s and early 80s. This was the most frustrating loss that I can remember. Poor delivery into a forward 50 resulting in low percentage shots, missed gettable shots, and don't start me on the score review that has won the Cheetahs 3 recent games, us Swans and us again. Gill's wet dream departure scenario is a Pies versus Blues grand final, and he has certainly given every assistance to this dream. I can only hope that Gill's dream is shattered, as ours was tonight, by Brisbane beating the Cheetahs and Port and GWS beating Collingwood. That was before the other game. But back to us, where do we go to change our greatest weakness? Scoring goals is surely the KPI of this game. There seems to be several elements to this structure. How many talls, medium, smalls, and who rotates with who and when? Do we have the structure if Petty returns in his pre-injury form? If JVR does another full pre-season? Has done particularly well for a second-year player, in my opinion. But who else? Melksham won't be ready until the last few games of 2024, if at all. Tom McDonald, a great servant that he has been, looks to be on his last legs. Big Benny Brown surely has no functioning knees and should be retired. Smith has surprised me and was very good tonight. Shacky clearly did not have the confidence of the coach when he was not subbed in for a poor Tom McDonald, who just couldn't run or jump. So the forward debacle isn't just personnel The forward debacle isn't just personnel or just structural. It is also delivery and also positioning and creating space and leading. Do we need new specific forward coaches and forward mid-connection teams? 16 goals, 27 behinds in our 2 narrow finals losses just about says it all. 2 goals, 6 behinds in the final quarter says a lot. Is it soft under pressure, which I think is wrong? Binman will no doubt has the quarterly pressure ratings, which I have no doubt will be amazingly high, or just trying set shots at goal from poor positions. Do we need, and Petty will no doubt help, a new structure, or is a new mindset more important? Mindset from both forwards, but also midfielders and half-back. Should we adopt more of an SAS mantra? Who dares wins? And Bidman, should we expunge the stat expected score? Backline has done a sterling job most of the time, and Tomlinson has added much in the structure, releasing lever to intercept. His failure to get enough percentage of centre and other clearances. Demons having no, can't read what he's written. Dominant ruck. Yeah. Anyway, we've also got a. That's it from Monocular. We've got something from Noah.
Hi, this is Noah from Bentley. Just wanted to say that the podcast this year has been a great solace for me in being able to comprehend the win and losses that we've had this year. Whilst I was disappointed with the loss against Carlton, I did expect that we weren't going to win the game, purely for the fact that we haven't had a forward line all year. We've had so many injuries with Petty and Melksham. I think that Melbourne really needs to have a good, hard look at itself in terms of its forward line, which I've expressed all year. And I think we need to start getting rid of some old dead wood. I apologise if I reference Tom McDonald and also Ben Brown. I just think that we need to look to the future and we need to start looking for proper forwards. What I wanted to ask guys is, I think that in the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks of the finals, I think we've been working on playing more fast-paced football like the other teams, and I think that's what we were trying to do on Friday night with Carlton, but we just couldn't quite get there. And one of the main factors, obviously, was the inaccurate ball kicking and inability to kick under pressure. Just wanted to know your thoughts and opinions about the game and how we played in terms of the fast-paced footy, and whether you think Goody needs to come up with a new plan in 2024. And as always, love the podcast. Thanks, guys.
So, B-Man, you're not too concerned with our inside 50 entries. You are concerned with our poor conversion. Injuries, you've got no control over. Some or all of that is part of our downfall this year. What fixes can you see for our in our forward 50 for next year, if any?
Well, like I'd say two things. So that idea is that our entries are poor. You know, it's because, exactly as George said before, it's because there's shit kicks going inside 50. It's not because there's some sort of problem with the system. Like, as I said, every single team is now basically using a version of the same game plan. Forward half, get territory, score from turnover and score on transition. That's the way teams are playing now. Teams aren't scoring from stoppages. Even Carlton have shifted in the last third of the season towards Melbourne's game plan and away from stoppages. As I just said, we outscored them from stoppages. We would have outscored them from transition if we could do better than kicking 4-13. So those kicks inside 50, you could say, oh, well, it's because our forward line's a mess. It's because they're rubbish kicks inside 50. It wouldn't matter if you've got, you've got Royce Hart and, you've got the best forward line of all time if you can't kick it to them. Having said all of that, it genuinely would make a difference if you've got some elite forwards. I mean, we didn't even talk about the fact that JVR didn't play in this game. Now, I reckon he needed a rest anyway, but he is a natural forward. He leads into the right spot. He knows how to compete. So for me, the fix is, we really need to bring in some. I wouldn't be wanting to draft or trade anyone who is not AFL elite kick. Number one, that'd be the number one thing that I would do. I saw on Demonland today that Jordan's asked for a trade. I really love JJ. Huge JJ fan, but he's not a great kick either. So, we can afford to lose him and bring in another, whoever we bring in elite kick, we need to bring in an elite kick. For the forward line, you'd have, in terms of that forward line conversation, you have to say that, Benny Brown's really, and Tommy McDonald, both, we can't be relying on them next year. Melksham's out for next year. I don't know what that means in terms of who we could bring in. We've got quite a lot of our draft pick. We're in great spot in our draft picks. Surely that will give us some power at the trade table. That's my area. I've got no, I really don't know about the trading. I don't take a huge amount of interest. I just whoever suits up for Melbourne in the beginning of next year. But in many ways, we've mirrored Richmond. One of the things that I thought was really fascinating at the time, and I think it won them 2 more flags, was, I knocked it at the time, but they brought in Lynch after falling at the hurdle in 2018, brought in Lynch in 2019 and won back-to-back flags. Is there someone out there that we could get? I had a nightmare of bringing in Mackay from Carlton to watch him spray the ball all over it.
Suits the brand.
Yeah, so I don't know the sort of trading or drafting situation to know who would be out there that, but let's face it, there's not going to be anyone ready-made who, Lynch was one out of the box, but if we get maybe one of the King brothers, I don't know. Obviously, Saints aren't going to give him up, and I think Suns have squared away the other one. So look, I don't think there is any fix. I don't think we don't need to throw out any babies with any bathwater. We've got a strong team. The real gut-wrenching thing about this loss is that, as I said, would have been confident we would have been Brisbane. It's different to last year. We ran out of gas. We should have won this game of football. We should have beaten Collingwood, and we shouldn't have even been having this conversation now. We should have been previewing the prelim. So this is 100% a lost opportunity. Now, in one of the comments in there was a comment about, just on expected score, by the way. Tell Goody then to take it off the top of the board. So again, it was on the very first thing that he shows the players is expected score. So, the AFL coach is showing that at quarter time, presumably half time and 3/4 time. So, I'm not the only one who values or puts some value in expected score. Our senior coach does as well, obviously.
But if it's incorrect and there should be an asterisk next to it, maybe they should take 20% off it.
Yeah, well, they should. Well, no, Jack, they should. Yeah. They should, absolutely. So, again, I go back to 57% disposal efficiency by foot on a perfect night. That is just not going to cut the mustard. It's just not going to. Really, that's it in a nutshell. So, and, Salem had a really horror final, never really got going, did he? And he was our best kick for 2 or 3 seasons. And he's probably not we're just not getting enough of the pill. And he wasn't impacting or certainly, damaging. I thought Bowie got closed down a fair bit. But in that one of the questions, I think from Monocular or maybe someone else, Andy, is that question about whether we choked, and I think there's another question.
Yeah, there is a choking
or whether the pressure. I think, look, if I was brutally honest, I think the pressure did get to us in this game. That miss by Maxi in the third quarter, if we got it out past 3 goals, that whole game changes, because then they have to score themselves to get going. We kept them in it by those misses and heaped pressure on ourselves. And I think that was betrayed in the last sort of 6 or 7 minutes, and there was a period in the third quarter where we were like chickens without heads. But particularly in the last 2 or 3 minutes, I have to say my feeling is that that's why I said that accuracy was the most significant factor, second most significant factor in the loss. I think the biggest factor was that we didn't manage our emotions in the last 90 seconds, 2 minutes of the game. We should, Melbourne at our best, we don't give up a game like that. We do not lose, Maxi doesn't hit it back into play like that. I haven't seen a replay of that, but at the ground I was thinking, what the hell just happened? Did that not go with Oliver, the one that Oliver kicked, did that not go through? And it felt to me that Maxi, he's had he was a bit rattled. So I don't know what you guys felt, but it felt to me that last 3-4 minutes of the last quarter is we didn't handle the pressure particularly well, and we not only didn't we execute on our set shots and our general play shots, but we also didn't execute our field kicking.
I think we don't need an asterisk on the expected score. I think we need a disclaimer saying past performance is not indicative of future results.
Well, not
In this case,
on average. Our past performance is.
It is, yeah. In this case, it is, yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of the forwards, though, for next season, we do have a serious problem because I can't see Ben Brown continuing beyond this year. T-Mac, I wouldn't be surprised as well. And we haven't got Melcham. That's 3 forwards that we haven't got. We need at least one more body of some sort to fill a hole. Jefferson isn't ready as a forward yet. Unless
Petty.
He's made of glass.
Our best defender. Our third best defender is now our best forward.
Yeah.
The great white hope.
Yeah, but he's made of glass.
But we're still missing 3 forwards.
Yeah, and we've still got Grundy. We haven't got rid of him yet.
Has he? I think he's requested.
He's requested a trade to Bondi. I think.
Yeah.
He only wants to be within 5 kilometres of Bondi Beach, I think, is one of his contract clauses.
Well, that means Demonland is looking for a new player sponsor. So if anyone has any requests,
is that another curse for the Demonland curse?
Yeah, we haven't done that well.
That's a good point, George, about the cupboard is bare. I mean, Jefferson is a fair way away, I think. I don't know. I said after the Blues game that I didn't think that T-Mac would play again, such was he's at the Blues Casey game at Icon Park. Such was his lack of lateral movement and his general immobility. And so I was shocked when he came in for the Pies. He was our second least or third least lowest rated player in that game, and he was our second lowest rating player in this game. He might, he almost didn't play for the rest of the season.
But the fact is our cupboard is bare. That's why he was playing. We have no other option.
Shaki, I mean, what did you guys make of Goody?
Well, we're going to talk about that. We've got a question about the sub and lack thereof a bit later on. You just go back to the Richmond game, and we had Petty, Melksham, JVR, 14 goals between them, and that was all missing the other night.
And George's point, such an important one here, and he made it a couple of weeks ago, is that Petty kicked, what was it, 14 goals straight or something?
Petty was 12 goals won.
12 goals won.
6 straight against the Tigers.
Even in that game against North Melbourne when we couldn't get go, it was Petty who kicked them from the boundary line. Yeah. Like Petty with his technique, he would have, kicked a couple of these clutch goals. Even if JVR was in this game, he would have kicked it because they have got good technique. And good technique holds up under pressure. Bad technique gets exposed under pressure.
Let's talk the umpires. Clintosaurus wants us to just talk about the umps for an hour. Doug Remus says, well done on the pod this year, lads. The club needs to ask for an official please explain in regards to A&B's goal being called touched. That was an absolutely effing disgrace. I want B-Man off the long run for 5 minutes of umpire bashing. In fact, just make the entire pod an umpire bashing Bidman megamix. I need it after having to sit through that garbage. We could have 46 umpires and it wouldn't change the fact that they're effing useless. I'll never watch the replay of Friday night's censored show again. I can't do it. Ned Legg says, do you believe there are really questions to be answered in terms of how we're treated by the umpires? Does the club need to officially make some point about Max getting clobbered on and off the ball, or the severity of our suspensions, etc., etc.? Does it need to appeal these suspensions more vociferously? Is there even an issue just against us, or is the umpiring of the game more generally in trouble, and all supporters of all clubs feel they're hard done by? The arc is obviously a whole separate issue that everyone is unsatisfied with. Or should we just straighten up our kicking, in which case we win most of the games we lost this year? Umpires be damned. And I'm loath to blame the umpires, but I thought we were hard done by in the adjudication of this match. And once again, and I say it all the time, it's the free kicks you don't get that hurt you the most. And maybe it's just my red and blue lenses that I view all of our matches with, because I thought that they did get some very soft free kicks, and in turn we weren't rewarded with the same soft ones. And don't get me started on the blessed run the Blues have had with score reviews. George, can I at least blame the umpires? I haven't been too hard on them this season, probably because I think our differential this season was in the positive, but I need to blame someone. So can I blame the umpires at least to make me feel better?
I just wondered why I'm getting this job. I thought they wanted big
They
man
did
off
want
the,
big man,
off
but
the long run.
I'd assigned it to you already, and big man can jump in afterwards. But yes,
Okay, so I'm the soft option, so that's fine. But look, I wasn't worried about the umpires. We shot ourselves in the foot with a couple of the Cozzy in that first quarter when
but that was
Joel
soft
Smith,
to reverse that.
Yeah,
it was undisciplined.
Maybe but the thing is, this is a final. Everything's on the line. Don't do stupid things like that.
Yeah, that was soft.
That was not head in the game stuff.
No,
but mind you, that was right below me. It would have been right below where you were sitting too, Andy. And there's no way that was a reverse. I couldn't even. I saw it and then was confused about what had happened and thought maybe it was touched or something. Then they showed the replay. That was ridiculous. Like a free kick.
Yeah. But apart from that, we had the don't know whether it was Tom McDonald abusing the umpire or whether Oliver refused to step back to the 9 metre mark. That was another 50 that went up the other end when it was deep in our forward line.
Cozzy did the same thing.
Cozzy, and Cozzy also did when he ran past the man having his kick, and there was another 50 that moved them into their forward line. Tom Sparrow had the ball again on the 50-metre line and got into an argument with a Carlton player and rightly was reversed in that case. He threw him into the fence head first.
Oh, that was stupid. That was such a stupid time to do that as well.
And all of those things changed the game.
Yeah.
We're in the forward line on the move, and you do something really stupid like that. The few decisions, rightly or wrongly, about the umpires, I don't think affected the game nearly as much as our own stupidity in this case.
I agree with that, George, and I think that sort of goes to my point about, I reckon we didn't manage the pressure as well as what Melbourne has in the past. That's where I landed, and but this conversation about the umpires, though, is definitely going to move me through the 5 stages of grief, and I might get to anger actually, because. I take your point, George. There's no way we're blaming the umpires for this loss. But again, it was a pathetic performance by the umpires again. It's just not good enough. It's just simply not good enough. And like the Nibbler one, I could not believe it after almost fainting from yelling when Nibbler kicked a banana of all thing, to overturn that. They must have other footage because what they showed on the big – I haven't seen I'm with I can't recall who said it, but I haven't watched a replay, never will. Until we win a flag, I'm not watching this game or the Pies game. So
the Nibble one, they overturned it.
Because could they possibly have been 100% certain?
What happened to the soft call? Who made a soft call to overturn it?
It's gone back. So they review every goal they review. In the window of time between when the flags are waved and it goes back to the centre before the ball's bounced, they review every single goal.
I've seen ones in other games that have been more conclusive that haven't even been looked at or all year.
That means the ARC reviewer has looked at the footage, and as I said, I didn't watch the replay or I didn't watch it live. Obviously, I was at the ground. I just saw
they showed it on the scoreboard,
on the screen. But from that vision,
you couldn't tell anything.
The ARC reviewer has made a call to say it was touched. Like how it has to be, he has to be or she has to be 100% certain that there was a deviation, that it's clear it's touch, because it's the soft call's a goal in that circumstance.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. That's the soft call is a goal. So how can they be certain?
So how could they? I just, that was inexplicable, and it did definitely had a bearing on the game, because I think that would have given us, like, we had the momentum.
We were like 2 goals
going.
up or something and had a big momentum at that stage.
Yeah, and I think, Andy, your point that you made any number of times really was huge in this game. It wasn't so much the free kicks that we gave away or give it. It was the ones that we didn't get. And the one, like, I fair dinkum, my head is going to fair dinkum explode at the football one time. The amount of manhandling that Maxi gets is ridiculous. That free, where he missed that goal, he just needed to kick that. That was in the third quarter. That would, I think, given us a 15-point lead, right in the shadows of three-quarter time. You get the first goal or the last quarter, and suddenly it's a four-goal ball game, and we go on to win the game. So he took a brilliant mark, and even in that mark, Pitternet had him wrapped up, like had his arms completely around him. But before that, about 30 seconds before that, he was literally thrown out of the marking contest by Pitternet, wrapped up and moved from one point to another point. And it's just got to stop. I don't know whether Melbourne are talking to them but something needs to be done. He is one of the best players in the AFL, Maxi, and he every week gets clobbered, manhandled, dragged out of contest. Given how important he is to our, whether we win a game or lose a game, obviously opposition teams have come out with a clear, strategy to target him. He's got to be protected. Otherwise, it's just a joke. I mean, there were so many other examples. I can't even begin because I will get angry. But there were so many times where we didn't get a free kick. And then it's made 100 times worse by them getting one. And, of course, the ones, my brain is going to explode, the deliberates. Those deliberates at the end of the game definitely had an impact. The one against Track.
They didn't pay some of them earlier in the game either, which were paid all year. And I don't always agree with the deliberates, but there were some earlier
they
that
pay the
weren't
one
paid.
to Track. Okay, you pay it, no worries. Literally 2 minutes later, they don't pay the one that was almost identical where it got kicked by their player in the middle. I couldn't even tell that it was Track who kicked that. It was so crowded from where he kicked it from on the Shane Warne side. Then down on the members' wing side or in that pocket, the Blues, I didn't realise why people were booing until I saw the replay, and it was clearly kicked deliberately out of bounds by the Blues player. 90 seconds after the Track? If he get that free kick, we've got a shot from inside 50, or at the very least we've got an ability to get it near the goal line. Critical decisions. And I just that same theme is that the AFL, once again, what are they doing in terms of the umpiring of the game? It wasn't just our game, by the way. The other games were appallingly umpired over the weekend as well. None, I'm not blaming the umpires for this loss. I thought actually they were worse the previous week, against the Pies, and I thought they did actually have an influence on the game. But it's so infuriating, and there was some I was just so infuriated at. It was frustrating enough that we weren't able to put them to the sword. And I don't buy into this stuff about conspiracy theories and the AFL want to get the Blues over the line, but I can see why people do, because they seem to get the rub of the green.
Well, it helps me sleep at night. So. George, there was the question someone had sent in a voicemail that you wanted to go somewhere else, which had to do with the no rucks in a couple of our forward line. Is that something we can discuss now because it sort of involves the umpires, or you want to do that later with the...
it's less about the umpires.
More about not having a ruckman.
I think it was all tied in with the rucks and the Shacky situation in any case. But this was more perhaps about the tactics. I mentioned it last week. We have this mechanism where usually Max sits about, when it's in our forward line, Max sits around about the 60-metre mark for the kick should it come out of the forward line. What we're doing is we're conceding the ruck contest that's occurring in the forward line. So Max comes out, stands on the 60. That means you then drag your full forward, usually a T-Mac or a JVR in the past, which leaves their full back unattended, effectively. We're playing the extra man outside the arc. In this game, for whatever reason, on 3 occasions, we had no one taking the ruck. We had whoever was on the ground as the ruck was sitting at the 60-metre line, and we got no one in the ruck.
Yeah, but
contest
who was in the forward line? Let's play ALS as just give him the due, and then we'll continue talking about it.
This is ALS in Mildura, a disappointing loss to say the least. One thing that puzzled me was that on 3 or 4 occasions, mostly in Melbourne's forward line, the umpire's call was no Melbourne ruck, suggesting there was some confusion as to the ruckman in the forward line, their role. Thank you. What do you think?
So who was in the forward line that should be taking the ruck? Was T-Mac there and he could have taken it? Well,
in one case, I think T-Mac was outside. So Joel Smith should have gone up in the ruck, and certainly in the last quarter, Petrarca finished up taking 2 ruck contests in the forward line. I'm going, why are we doing this?
Yeah,
how does that happen?
Why are we doing it? Why are we placing our best ruck outside assuming that the opposition are going to get the ball. Surely the object is to win the contest inside the 50-metre line to score rather than waiting for it to come out. And then all you're going to do is put it straight back in there again where you've got no ruck. It's just bizarre to me, absolutely bizarre.
And the caller's question's an interesting one because he's right. 2 times we didn't have anyone. There's no way that's a strategy.
More than 2.
And that, to me, speaks again of the that they're not dealing with the pressure, of being, because that's a structure thing, and who's supposed to be taking this, and where's T-Mac? Why isn't he taking it? I don't know where, by comparison, and I don't know where De Koning got these, but he had 8 ruck contests for 4 hit-outs to advantage. Sorry, he had 8 hit-outs, 4 of them to advantage. And so 50% of his hit-outs were at advantage. Now, I know he chopped out Pitnet in the middle, but I'm guessing, 2 or 3 of them might have been inside 50.
That's exactly, yep. We're conceding ruck contests inside 50.
Forward and back.
Right. Yeah, it's just ridiculous.
In our forward line and in our back line. And so, you've got De Koning taking, winning stoppages inside their 50, inside our defensive 50. It's got to give them an advantage. But it goes to the decision about, not having a second ruck in the team, or not using Shaki, or bringing Shaki on for T-Mac, and running him through the middle, or, a bit similar to last week with not using Laurie at all in the middle, and therefore not using Track up forward at all.
And it just seems like our forward line has no won't say cohesion, but like our back line is a real tight-knit group of players, and maybe it's an artifact of us, having players just in and out and rolling out, and but our forward line just never has seemed like a tight-knit group like our defenders
but because they haven't played enough games
I
together.
know. Well, that's
really,
and then stuff like that happens. You don't have a general saying who the F is taking that ruck contest, or you don't have that, and that's why you have a situation where you have no one rucking 3 or 4 times in a forward team.
And again, I'd say this is one of the reasons why this is so frustrating. Even with all of those things being 100% right, Andy, we still should have won this game of footy. We should be in a prelim. We should have beaten Collingwood. So even with our dysfunction, even with not having synergy, even with having players not using your sub, even, not having a ruck inside 50, even with those things happening, we still should have beaten Carlton.
BDA says, our game that is built for finals, but we can't win finals. Are we very close or very far? I'm not sure. Injuries to our forward line is a big factor for sure, but I'm with RPFC from earlier. We need to freshen things up. Some new faces are around Goody with fresh ideas and game plan-wise, take more risks. Keen to hear what the boys think. Lazy adds, when do we stop using injuries as an excuse? We did really well with the cards we were dealt this year, but just like the inaccuracy, there is little control over it, and I feel like people are just hoping that we will somehow be perfect next year. We need to control the controllables. Game plan personnel and coaching staff need to be looked at. Supreme Demon asks, what do we need to do to recuperate from a humiliating 2 straight set losses in final series? How does the Melbourne Football Club get better? It needs to be premiership or bust in 2024. Who should we look to recruit? Better decision makers and elite kicks into our forward line. Better kicks a goal. Does the Demons coaching team also need an overhaul? So, B-Man, I'll get your thoughts on our game plan in 2023 and what changes we made this season, and whether we stuck with those changes throughout the season, as well as any tweaks you think need to be made going into 2024. But before you do that, I think we do need some fresh faces and ideas, in particular in regards to our forward line. And I'm not sure what the situation with the soft cap on coaches is next season, but I think we really must bring in a true forward line coach, someone that has played exclusively as a forward, someone who understands leading patterns in the modern game, and we simply can't double up a ruck coach and a forward coach. especially as our forward line, I believe is our weakest line. And I think we did do well with the cards that we were dealt, and as you said, we nearly nearly did win. But if we make one change in the off season, for me, that's the one we need for me. So, Big Man, do you want to talk about our game plan in 2023? We did make some tweaks. Did we stick with that throughout the year? And do you see any new tweaks to our game plan that need to be done next year?
Well, I mean, the tweaks that we made were early on were replicating some of the method. The Pies method was moving it quickly off the halfback flank. Again, sort of what I was saying, and as Weber noted as well, we sort of shifted towards being much more a turnover team. So we score most from turnover. We're the best team in the AFL at scoring from turnover and stopping the opposition from scoring when they turn over. Our game is always going to be built under Goody defensively. So that defensive system and that all-team defence is always going to be the heart of our game. And I think that that's the advantage we have over the rest of the competition, because it takes a long time to build that system. The Giants, I've been super impressed. They've built a system, that maybe that contradicts what I'm saying, because they've developed a fantastic defensive system, which is a very, very similar model to us. You've got Taylor being intercept marker, who's like equivalent of a combination of Lever and May. They're very strong defensively. As I said before, the game plan, the tweaks, that scoring from transition carried through all the way through the end of the season, except for the fact that our accuracy fell away. Now, the question is, the weather didn't help. That impacts our accuracy, but so does pressure of finals. It's the same deal. But as I said before, I think a really curious thing, just as a general thing about AFL footy at the moment, is that the game plans are all looking more and more similar. And I keep saying this is it's starting from the template that Hardwick introduced at the Tigers. Territory, forward half, the change has been the importance of those high half forwards getting up and down the ground and the amount of running that happens and scoring it onto transition and defending the opposition on transition. The Pies have been brilliant at all season, or the first half of the season, on scoring from the back half, the best in the AFL. Port, not so much. They like to get it forward and keep it forward. But what I find fascinating is the Pies game plan's changed, and it's changed to almost be, basically the same as us. You look at that game, when they were dominant in the game we played with them last week, it was when they dominated inside 50s. It was 60%, 40% in that first quarter. It was basically like playing Melbourne. They went to town on Melbourne. They out Melbourne. And same in this, there's clear Voss at the halfway stage of the season. He brought in those high half forwards, Cotterill and Cunningham, to really fix up their issue of defending on transition and moving from transition themselves, and basically became Melbourne. They play almost identical model to us. Even as I just said, we beat them. Everyone was talking about, they're a stoppage and clearance team. Well, we beat them in stoppages. We beat them in clearances. Would have beaten them scores from turnover if we could, kick accurately. Similarly, Giants, as I said, they've got, it's almost an indistinguishable game plan from us. So I guess where I'm heading with this is that, in fact, rather than at the beginning of the season with the Pies game plan being the plan that others were looking to emulate, it's actually now we're at the business end of the season. It's the Demons game plan that has become the template, is the template. And we've taken that template from the Tigers with some tweaks. Probably the one difference in that whole, is Port Adelaide. And as I said last week, they're 13th or something for points against, which is like, that's never going to win you a flag. And they're out in straight sets too. One of the things that, they've got some cover because Melbourne have gone back-to-back straight sets, which is just unbelievable to think about. But Port also have two. Did they win out in straight sets last year? No, they won one, didn't they?
They weren't in the finals.
They weren't in there.
No. They didn't go right there in the finals last year. Port. Port didn't make the final roll. There you go. So we'll Port out in straight sets this year. The one difference in game plan that they've got is they haven't got the defensive system that the other teams have. So Giants have got a very similar defensive system to us. Even the Pies have modified their defensive system to a much more Melbourne-like. They're set deeper. They're not pushing up as high. They're not taking as many risks on defense, and they're not being scored out the back. So you look at the score. There's a big talk, in this podcast as well about our low scoring. Have a look at what the scores that the contenders have been putting up in the last, 6 weeks. Brisbane aside, a flogging Port, that once they go on their bike, so that that they're going to be the outlier. And Giants were similarly, effective in the first half at least at scoring. But just on the Giants, did you notice in that game? I'm sure if you boys watched that game, they almost kicked themselves out of it with poor kicking. Yeah. Despite their domination, they kept Port in it. Port had a chance if it weren't for their poor kicking for goal. So, on the game plan, I think we'll take a relatively similar game plan, at least the fundamentals going forward, which is a defensive system that's super strong, all team defense being critical, win territory, win the contests, score on transition and score on turnover. That's AFL footy at the moment, and nothing's going to change. So, the tweaks for next year is, I really think that I don't know, like this, I'm not any good on the training stuff, but I would be looking to clear out as many players as we can. Of course, it's hard to bring in quality ball users, but that's all I would look at if I was Taylor in the club. I just wouldn't, unless they're elite kicks, I wouldn't even think about bringing a player into the club, because that is the difference at the moment between us and the Pies and even the Giants is, if you think of the Giants, I keep coming back to the Giants, but they're so similar to us. They've clearly modelled their game plan on us, but they've got Kelly, they've got Whitfield, they've got Caniglio, who's a brilliant ball user. They've got Taylor's a good ball user. They use the ball so much better than us, and that's what we need to do. We need to bring in some really good ball users. Remember, JVR's only a kid. He'll be only 20 next year, so he'll have another full preseason. He's going to be a monster. So let's not forget we've got an A-grade potential A-grade player there, so he'll go up another level. Petty plays. If both of those two players play 23 games next year, there's our forward line issues solved. The challenge will be them playing 23 games next year.
I think there's for the average football follower, there's been this year a dramatic change that most of the teams in the top 8 adopt a very similar sort of style. And the teams that are outside the top 8 certainly don't, or they can't implement it. And for the average football follower, you see it last year. Remember, everyone was complaining about kicking into the pockets. Hardly seen this year.
Yeah,
people are kicking to the top of the square, and we saw it first at training pre-season. The reason we're kicking to the top of the square is because people are moving the ball, the transition game that's coming off the half-back line, moving the ball quickly through the middle. So you see the Melbournes, the Collingwoods, the GWS, even Brisbane, all adopting the same style. But when you start to watch teams like St Kilda, for example, North Melbourne, the teams down the bottom, they switch the ball. That's what was happening 2 years ago.
Yeah,
top teams don't switch the ball.
Exactly. That's a great point, George. Switching's gone, isn't it? It's go forward. It's like, in some ways, it's a throwback to Barassi's period, is that you don't go across the ground. It's a wasted opportunity. You go forward, and then you back yourself in to win that next contest. And you're right, George. All the teams are kicking to the top of the square, but it's not coming out in the same way it was 2 years, because all of the top teams, once they do get territory, they're all pushing forward, and they've all got enough runners to be able to get back if they turn it over, or they're setting up walls. Again, as I said, Giants, it was weird watching it, because they set up that wall, then just kept on kicking it back in, and Port just couldn't clear it from the zone. It's that idea, it makes sense, is you can get it inside 50 and trap it there. That's the way all the teams are wanting to play at the moment. And the better teams have players who can kick under pressure and take their opportunities. And, one of the things I've said for the Lions for the last 3-4 years is where they've got us is their mid-size forwards who kick goals, the Baileys, the McCarthy, exactly. Those players are. We don't have enough of those mid-sized players because not only do they get in good spots, they take their chances.
Gunners says, Goody in his press conference mentioned that the club will look at ways to be better. What is your take on this? George, what learnings did you take from Goody's press if you watched it?
Learnings. You could write articles about learnings, couldn't you? I listened to it again after this, looking at this question. I think there were, firstly, I think Goody was just as equally shattered as the supporters were and the players were after this match. So it's difficult to take something away from it. What I did take away was the number of times that he mentioned the word opportunities. That was mentioned 4 times. We failed to take opportunities.
Did not execute.
And the second word was executing, which was mentioned 5 times. Did not execute. Briefly talked about inefficiency forward. Again, that's about execution. The other one was winning the moments. And those are that winning the moments for me in finals is absolutely critical because finals are a basic sort of form of football where you have to beat your man, and hopefully you've got 18 players on the field, of which at least 10 beat their man, because finals are just that. It's one-on-one, contest to contest, winning the moments. But for Goody, it was executing and taking opportunities, which was why the loss occurred ultimately. Every coach in the same position says the same thing. We don't care about the past, but what we do have to look is you can't live in the past because that's happened. You've got to look forward. What are we going to do next year? I think it's pretty obvious that he knows exactly what we've been talking about, what all the fans feel. It will be something will be done about it as best we possibly can in all sorts of manners. What you don't want to hear is them coming away saying, we were beaten by a better side. We have to become the better side. And I think that's the message that we'll take away.
Yeah, I thought it was a fascinating press conference. I can't believe how long it takes them to put it up on the AFL app. I just wanted to see the presser and put the whole game to bed. So I don't think I saw the presser till after midnight, but he looked and sounded like my brain was operating. But there were a couple of interesting things I thought, George. One was your point about moments was interesting because, there was 2 moments in the last 90 seconds. One was, again, no coincidence. It was Viney's terrible kick to give it straight to Wiedering. And then, this wasn't really a bad mistake. It wasn't a mistake at all by McVie, but he's not able to get a hand on that ball that was snaffled and it got kicked up to Akers was the defining moment in the match almost. He hits that ball towards the boundary and wins the next contest. We potentially go on and hold on. It was only, I think, 57 seconds.
There was a contra-view which you got to forgive McVie because he was trying his absolute guts.
Exactly. And coming from a long distance away. And
I can't remember which commentator replayed that and said if he'd actually not tried to do that to get his hand to the ball, he would have held Akers up.
Yeah, no, Akers. The 39. What's his name then? Not the skipper. It was Akers who kicked the goal.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah.
But on that play, so I haven't watched the replay. So there was that. You're right. If he'd just not gone for the mark and held him up, he would have forced him to kick inside, and people would have got back.
That's right. Yeah.
Again, I was just above the goal, so I was down in the Shane Warne, right behind the goals on the second level. The weird thing about that was Fritsch had gone back. Fritsch had gone back and played as a spare man and defence, and didn't impact that contest to Akers. Like he was there. He was in the goal square. Akers was just in front of him. Now I know it was, but he just didn't impact Akers' contest. Then the third thing that was weird, didn't end up hurting them, was why did Akers play on? Why didn't Akers take the full 30 seconds? So Akers gave us a shot. We had 50 seconds left on the clock, I think it was. Not that it mattered in the end, but that was the other weird thing. But you're right. If McVie had just held him up, had not gone for the effort, then he probably would have held him up. But the Viney kick to Wiedering was, he just needed to clear Wiedering, and we probably score on that play because I think Track was out the back.
It was out the back on his own,
Yeah. And final thing that, George, that you're saying is that the other thing about the moments is that in finals you can't give, opposition free kicks metaphorically or literally. And we, those 50s you talked about before and that brain fade by Sparrow gave them both, didn't it? Gave them momentum when we had it and gave them territory in the examples of the 50s and, gave the ball back to them when, it should have been in our hands.
A lot of coulda, shouldas, woulda. Supreme
Good
Demon
name for a horse, I reckon, Andy.
Yeah, because Supreme Demon, are we going to be known as chokers in finals? Why can't we win these vital finals games in front of huge crowds at the MCG? Do we get stage fright? Great Northern Summer asks, whose choke was worse, ours on Friday night or Essendon's in the 1999 preliminary final? They're on par with me, two worse by a mile. Despicable Me says, I came to this podcast late in the year. B-Man had posted after a loss to Geelong how we could win 8 of the next 9 games and go into the final series as favourites for the Flags, or words to that effect. And I replied suggesting he's kidding himself, and how could you put such faith in a team that is so disappointing? So when we went on a winning streak, just as B-Man said, I thought, I better start listening to this podcast, and wow, how great it has been. My personality is like Andy, and if the sky isn't falling down, then it is surely imminent, and George's tales and Big-Man's statistics offer me a safe and nurturing place for any wretched and tortured soul. Well done to you all. I am now a devoted fan and look forward to anything you may get up to podcast-wise in the off-season and hopefully into next season. My question is mainly to Big-Man. I've grown to trust the side a lot more from listening to you and your statistics showing me how we play a good brand of football, the right brand for finals, and I know the team were unlucky and a victim of circumstances with injuries, etc. But I think we have to recognise that there is something weird about our group, not quite right, a certain lack of synergy combined with an almost nervous mental condition. It was as if we lost the last 2 games rather than our opponents winning. Big crowds, 2 suspensions in finals. Carlton were really just waiting for the death blow that never came. Obviously recognising our dominance and flag-winning exploits in 21, can you please discuss this ability we have to not achieve when it is within our grasp? Thanks again for a great show, and of course, go D's. P.S. Andy, sorry for the long post. It's my first. I'll try to be more succinct in the future. No, I thought that was a great question, great lead up, and thank you for all the kind words you said about the podcast. So, Big Man, 2 seasons in a row, we've been bundled out in straight sets. Are we chokers?
No, it would be my short answer. Last year we ran out of gas. I don't think we choked. I don't think we choked last week. I think we should have won the game, but we didn't choke, and there were some, some factors that certainly worked against us. The weather, obviously, Gus was the big one, losing Gus early, and the impact of that. And it's interesting to talk to the players about what impact that might have had. Continuing echoes of impact through the week in their preparation and their mindset. But as I said before, I think choke's probably not quite the right word. I don't know, it's maybe harsh, but I think we definitely, maybe it's a semantic thing. So, but we didn't manage the pressure of this game. It was the first time in a long time for me that I felt like we really didn't. So I think it's definitely a question, that the club is going to have to answer all season next year. I mean, it's hard not to think in the back of their minds, we didn't put them away when we did. We weren't ruthless. We didn't take our chances. I would argue that, execution pressure exacerbates poor technique, as I've said any number of times. Pressure of expectation is as powerful as the pressure of the moment, I think. And, I do wonder whether in the back of their minds late in that late in the last quarter, the thought of, if we lose this, we're out in straight sets again, might have loomed large in a lot of those players' minds. And, I wouldn't accuse us of choking, but I don't think we handled the pressure very well in that match. And in particular, I'd say the last 90 seconds, because taking away doesn't really matter how inaccurate you are, in the lead up. We should have iced the game. They would have done that, that 2-minute drill. The last 2 minutes, you've got a 4-point lead. with 2 minutes to go. This group would have done that hundreds of times, that scenario at training, and to not ice it, it speaks to me that they were a bit rattled, that the pressure did get to them. I wouldn't think that, the environment, and not so much. I think it's the fear of failing, the fear of losing, the fear of going out in straight sets. And, on top of that, if you've got your best players fumbling as well. The other thing, Track fumbled a fair bit, I thought. I don't know if you guys thought similar. And there was some, as I said at the top of the show, there was some funky things like, Maxi, I haven't seen a replay. I'm not sure if you boys have, but was that going over when Maxi hit it back into play, or am I imagining that?
Yep.
No, he hit it in. He hit it into the goalpost.
Why didn't he just leave it?
That's exactly it, mate.
That's from a player who is brilliant under pressure and has won us games off his own boot, and has played some of the best games of AFL footy of any player in the last decade. On top of that, he missed the goal in the third quarter, and then he missed the goal on the point line in that last quarter, and hit it back into play. If that goes through, if he shepherds that through, we win the game. That speaks to someone whose head was who didn't handle the moments, as George said before.
So just some light asphyxiation. Okay.
Yeah. So all right, they choked. Okay.
Supreme Demon asks, why the unused super sub of Josh Shackey? It was a waste. Why not Brodie Grundy? I thought tactically we were outmanoeuvred by Carlton. Would a running player like Tajai Woden or even Michael Hibbert have been a better option? Pipefitter says the bizarre choice of sub, their non-selection, was not our coaching group's finest moment. What would you have done differently? Demon's Rules asks, what impact did the chopping and changing of team selection have on our performance? Turner then Hibbert, then Tomlinson, Laurie then Spargo. It felt like there was no consistency into who the selectors actually trusted. How can the selection of Shackey over Grundy be explained/justified? Thanks for your efforts over the years. I really appreciate all the time you put in. This one is going to take a long time to get over. And we've got a voicemail from our good mate Salty on the sub/selection.
Hey boys, Salty here. Wow, what a way to go out. I feel like we've sort of snatched losses from the hands of victory in both those games, and pretty scorned from both of them. Avoided all media over the weekend. On the GWS train now, obviously. But yeah, pretty brutal way to go. Going to comment on I've seen a few people comment on social media about, sack Goody and Goody's not doing what he should do. I think that's tripe. Goody has got us in positions where we should win both those games, even with players missing. I really believe that he is the man for the job. I just think that, you can't do much about guys kicking 9-17. Again, I do think, why play Shackey or why have Shackey as sub and not bring him on? Like, T-Mac was useless. Why not change things up? I don't even know why you'd play Shackey in the first place if you're not going to play him. Why wouldn't you play Woden? Why wouldn't you play, I don't know, Hibbo off the bench? If Hibbo's not injured, why wouldn't you play him off the bench? At least he gives us something. Really baffled by that decision not to actually bring the sub on. I think it was hard to understand. Anyway, I hope you boys have all recovered. Andy just won't do anything for your MFCSS. It surely hasn't done anything for mine. I'll be a basket case come finals next year if we happen to make it again. But I do also believe, put in Gus, put in Petty, put in Melksham, we probably win both those games. And looking at it, looking maybe at a qualifying final or whatever it's called. All right, guys. Thanks for the year. I appreciate your positivity. Go D's for next year. Bye.
I think you meant preliminary final. But, George, what were your thoughts on selection in general and the use or lack thereof of the sub?
Yeah, sort of two separate things here in one sense. Firstly, the selection. I have got no idea why Shackey was selected. I have no idea why Grundy wasn't selected. There would have to be a serious fallout of some sort between Grundy and the club for him not to be selected in this game. We spoke about it last week. Carlton have two rucks. we had Max, who played 87% of the game. I noticed in the third quarter he played the whole quarter. You can't expect to go into a final expecting your sole ruckman to be doing that. It's too physically demanding. We needed Grundy to be the backup. If you were going to use someone like T-Mac as the backup, well, use him. And we still didn't do that. It was just incomprehensible. Then we have Shaki on the bench supposedly as a ruck. Shaki's played 2 games this season. In the second game, he had 1 disposal. The reason he's not in the side is because he wasn't offering anything. So what was he actually doing there? Was he there as a forward or was he there as a ruck? I've got no idea. And whatever it was, they didn't use him in any case. It was just incomprehensible. Like I said, the only thing I can think of is that there was a major falling out with Grundy of some sort. You've got to probably wait for one of the media people to discover the real story, but I doubt that we will. It really cost us in the end. Max was tired unduly. We didn't have rucks on a number of occasions, as we pointed out before. We didn't get anything out of T-Mac in the forward line. In any case, why Shaki wasn't brought on instead of T-Mac, given that the coach was asked that question in his presser and he said, we needed a big body down there in the forward line in the last quarter. Except the big body hadn't done anything for the previous 3 quarters. And if you wanted the big body, well, why did you have Shaki there as well? Because he's certainly not a big body. Like I said, it fails the pub test for me in all aspects. It's unexplainable, sorry.
That's it's interesting to say that, because actually the thing that rang my bell a little bit about the press conference was Goody was asked about why didn't you use Shaki, and his answer seemed to be, if I'm paraphrasing, was that Shaki was there as backup for Maxi, because Maxi had come in with a broken foot and that he'd been playing with a broken foot for a number of weeks, and we needed a backup, a chop out, just in case Maxi went down. Was the implication, is that you bring in Shaki like in the old school days of having your reserve who only comes on in, like in break glass emergency rather than a sub, which it struck me as a really strange explanation. And I reckon you're spot on. It doesn't pass the pub test about why Grundy didn't play, because, Maxi wasn't himself. Now, it only came out during the week that he had a broken foot and had been playing with it for some time, but he didn't have a great game. So his player rating for this game was, just looking, he was the 25th rated player in this game. So, only behind Brodie Kemp and Matthew Kennedy was on, and I think Kennedy was a sub, wasn't he? So Kennedy came on as a sub, and
what's his name? Elijah Hewitt. Oh, sorry, that was for Carlton. Yeah,
so Gorney his best player rating for the season, I think it was in the Giants game, but it was 35.4. He's the expected score for this, or his estimated predicted score for this by Willow, was 14, and that's an average game for Maxi. So he averages something like 12 or 13 rating points per game. He only had 7.2, so nearly half of his season average for this game, Maxi. So he didn't have a huge game, and I'm not knocking him for not having. You can't expect him to be your best player every week. But by comparison, the number 1 rated player in this game, and Willow had his predicted rating for this match at 10.3. The match high score was 20.9, and it was Tom de Koning. So, and Tom McDonald, who's the equivalent of Tom de Koning, the forward who gives the main rucker chop out, he was the 45th ranked player out of 46, with 0.7 for the match and only 0.3. He was negative 12. Tom McDonald was negative 12 rating points for the second half. Well, why doesn't Shaki come on for Tom McDonald? I thought it was like the most obvious thing in the world. Like, Tommy McDonald was struggling. He wasn't taking the rucks. Those scores, like he scored he was less effective than Shaki sitting on the bench if he's got negative player ratings. Why not bring him on? And then the other part of that is, what message are you sending to Shaki? What sort of player management is that? Like, we're not going to use him even though, our main ruckman is struggling and Tommy McDonald is stopped. Basically, he's stopped moving up and down the ground and is offering nothing. You've got a forward who love him or not like him, he's an accurate kick for goal. I would have rather him come on and take a mark and have a shot from 40 than just about any other player, I reckon.
You certainly had nothing to lose by bringing him on because, if you replaced T-Mac, you had nothing there in any case. So, but yeah, it was incredible. The statements of if Shaki's there as a backup ruck, why isn't Grundy there as the backup ruck?
Well, why then? If he's not a backup ruck, why don't you bring him on for T-Mac, who was cooked in the last quarter, who is the backup ruck? Why don't you bring in Shaki as the backup ruck to be a backup ruck to Maxi?
There's something that's just not quite right about the whole scenario.
Yeah, I reckon you're right. They will come out through the whispers over the off season
about. It has to be. You hit the nail on the head there, George. If he was in there as backup ruck, why wouldn't you play an All-Australian backup ruck who is on your list? Whether he's got one foot out the door or not, he's still here for this season. He's contracted to the Demons now, here and now. He would want to win a premiership, you'd think, if possible. Why not play? And there must have been some falling out completely, and they've said, "No, you're not playing in next year." Maybe they did what they didn't do with Luke Jackson last year, knowing he's probably gone, and they're saying, "No, well, you're not playing." But we're in the business to win premierships. He's on our list.
Yeah. I hadn't actually thought about that. If Shaki doesn't get on the ground at all, what difference would have it been to put Grundy as the sub?
Yeah.
At least you bring on an All-Australian sub for the T-Mac would have been the obvious one. I agree, though. You're right, George. I reckon there's more in that, and we'll find out over time, potentially through the rumour mill, what that might be. And hopefully that doesn't leave a, sour or something, negative around the thingo. And, maybe there's something in there around the communication, how that was communicated right from the get-go. We talked about it on the podcast, the sort of funny way that was communicated by both Richo and Goody about him going back to forward craft and all of that stuff. So.
Even with a player like Shaki, I mean, that's there. He couldn't get in the team all year. We had all these forward problems and couldn't get in the team, then can't get on the ground. What message does that send to him? He might even say, well, maybe I'll go somewhere else.
He's been extended, so he
can't. Okay.
But as a player sponsor, Andy, haven't you got any sort of intel on it? Just make something up.
No, I won't. Buck Necked says, for having the best midfield in the comp, I thought we were terrible in the middle. Centre bounce setups were entirely defensive almost the whole night, and our ability to win the contest there and move forward was terrible. With the players available there, why do you all think we take such an approach? Is this a coaching issue, a skill issue, or something else? So, B-Man, you've highlighted the skill issues. Any thoughts on the matchups in the middle? Any further thoughts?
Well,
you've spoken
again, it's our stoppages. We outscored them from stoppages. So it's for those centre clearances. So they got it out, but they didn't actually do much damage from them. One of the things is we didn't have Gus in there so he's been a mainstay ever since Oliver went out. So basically for 3/4 of the season, Gus has been a mainstay in the midfield. So you take him out, then that's going to throw your systems. JJ didn't really impact, didn't have, all his weaknesses were there. It's an interesting point, though, is that there was a point where we just didn't, it felt more that we weren't getting any gold out of the centre. We weren't getting it out of there. But, as I said, we outscored them from stoppages, so it wasn't a major issue, except for the fact that we really in the last third of the season we never really got any goals ourselves out of the centre. They don't get many goals out of the centre, so it's not a major scoring source for any teams, and it looks great when it comes off. But I think it's a personnel issue. Oliver, I'm not sure how you felt Oliver played, but Certainly he came back, but he was out for a long time. All of that synergy, for a team that hadn't had any outs in that midfield for a long time, the consecutive games for Track and Oliver was huge in terms of how many, and Viney as well. And Viney, well, I guess the other factor too was Viney had another down night, didn't he? He didn't have his impact. I think Jared Healy say that he'd heard that he had the flu against Collingwood, that he was pretty sick, Viney. He didn't look like, if that was true, he didn't look like he had recovered. So, Gus is out. Viney didn't have a huge game, and Track only played 50% of the time, or a bit touch over in the midfield. That suddenly, then you got Sparrow and JJ doing the rest of the time. It suddenly drops from an A grade midfield to a B plus, doesn't it?
Dr. Gonzo says 5.5 years after costing us the game against the Cats, why does Gon still struggle with set shots within 30 metres directly in front? His miss on Friday was from an almost identical position to his kick that sealed the minor premiership for us in 2021. Those shots should be like shelling peas. What do you put our inaccuracy across the two finals down to? Fatigue because of game plan? I don't buy this because many missed shots were early in the game. Overwhelmed by the occasion. Struggled to handle the 90,000 plus crowd favouring the opposition. Bad luck. Converting our chances is the single biggest issue facing us in the off-season. So what should we do to address it? Demons Rule asks, do you think our poor kicking for goal was technique related or the associated pressure of playing in the finals? While we could have won both finals, we didn't, and in both finals we kicked very poorly for goal. Unless we can solve this problem in a pressure situation, aka finals, how can we expect to do better next year? Everything's a blur. Says, as always, love the potty guys and look forward to a cathartic listen. The season ended because we can't kick goals. Is this psychological, lack of talent, or are we missing the Burgess mental edge he brought to the team, and how do we get this back? Now, Big Man, I've got a voicemail from one of your favourite talkback callers, Enzo, on our accuracy.
Guys, this is the most upset I've been in my life. How do we kick 2 goals 6 in the last quarter? What's going on there? Why can't we finish off games? What's with this bad kicking? Forget about an analyst of the game. It comes down to one thing. You don't kick straight, you don't win footy. Don't even have a podcast and come up with any strategies of why we lost and all this. We lost because we can't kick straight. Pickett has lost the game for Melbourne again. Goodbye. Thank you.
Okay. Podcast over.
Well, I agree with Enzo from one point. He's right. But the answer to why are we missing them? It was interesting because as at BDA listed a whole range of things, what factors there could be in terms of why our accuracy is so bad, and missed the number one reason, which is poor technique. It's as simple as that. It's a poor technique. If you watch Track, the way he kicks the ball, even his field kicking, he drops the ball from a good foot above his foot. It was 101 in junior footy is you guide the ball onto your boot. You're literally almost from hand to boot. How many good technical kicks have we got in our side? Grundy, Max, why does he miss from 30 metres out? Because his technique is woeful. And all of his workarounds, like that arc that George talked about, it was a workaround to fix his woeful technique. And you're right, Andy, if you get to AFL level, there's only a handful of players at Melbourne that I can recall over the journey that have actually improved their field kicking and their set shot kicking after becoming an AFL player. Jonesy's one, and I reckon Langdon was one, but Langdon's kicking has been pretty substandard in the last few weeks as well.
Viney's improved his field kicking.
Viney, except his kicking has been appalling in both finals, was appalling. He's also got a crap technique. And so I would say is you grow up as a junior footballer and you shit kick. You don't become a good kick when you're in the AFL. And even if you're a half-decent kick in junior footy, You're then in AFL exposed to the sort of pressure that you get at the elite level at come finals, and it's the crisps, and it's the Pendleburys and the Dacosses and, Motlop. They've all got one thing in common, which is excellent technique. You watch the technique of Kelly, who I think is the best kick in the AFL, or Goulden, who many people say is the best kick. Their technique is brilliant. And I use this analogy all the time of golf. The best players win the best tournaments, like Scheffler. He puts himself, he's top 5 in every major, partly because psychologically he's so strong, but almost all because he's got the most rock-solid, bulletproof technique in golf. Right? It's technique is everything in kicking. And so, that's for me the cause of it, and then pressure, all of those factors that BDA listed, they're all correct, and they all play into it, and they all exacerbate poor technique. Pressure, weather, where you're kicking it on the ground, all of those things, weather, wind, they exacerbate it. But if your baseline is poor technique, well, you're going to struggle.
George, anything with that question actually I was going to throw to you? Anything? Any other solutions?
We've said it all along, and the people whose techniques are the worst are the ones who have been costing us. Like I said, the forwards, the actual live forwards, the JVRs and the petties are all good kicks with good technique. It's those mids, the Langdons, the Gorns, the Petrakas, the Olivers, the Vineys. These are the people who are costing us when they move forward.
And one thing I'd say, George, is credit to the opposition coaches, because what they've done really well in the last few weeks is to identify our best kicks and put lots of time into them. So they continued to put time into Salem, even though his form was down. Maybe the two are obviously correlated. They didn't give Salem any time and space, the Collingwood or Blues. They similarly, one of our better kicks for the last, say, 12 weeks has been Rivers. Yeah. Both Pies and Blues really put time into Rivers and took his influence away. Bowie, the same deal. They really targeted our best kicks. And, I think that, it's smart tactics. Let Track have the ball. Let Oliver have the ball. If they're not going to hurt the opposition, well, better them kicking the ball than Bowie. So halve Bowie's output, limit Salem's output, take away some of Rivers' dash and run and ability to kick the ball, and then you really hurt Melbourne.
Can I just play devil's advocate here, and just based on what you guys have been saying about some of our supposed A-graders, how can we call these guys A-graders if they don't have the basic skills to be A-graders and hurt the opposition?
That's a reasonable question, I think.
I not necessarily agree with that statement, but just what I'm hearing. Are these guys actually A-graders? Are they stepping up in finals?
What they do, they've got to be surrounded by, they've got to be you've got to have balance. Like, you can't have a team full of 22 elite kicks.
No, I understand.
As I said this at the beginning of the year, you need 4 or 5 elite kicks with the way football is at the moment. If you're going to go through the corridor, that's the other thing, as I was talking about last week, we could be more aggressive and take a higher risk on. We did in this match, but we turned it over a lot as well because we kicked the ball. You need balance. So, I think it's the knock-on track. It's less on Oliver, I think, but definitely it's the knock-on track.
Roosted Fast says, it was the most undisciplined game I've seen from us since the bad days. We burnt teammates, gave away 50s, didn't go when it was our turn and failed to shut down the game with the minutes left. On top of that, we again missed goals that would have had the game done. What leads to this on such an important night? Demons 1 says, where did our defenders go? It was 4 versus 1 when we copped that last goal. Our generals in May and Lever got sucked up the ground. Unbelievably dumb decisions all night, including dumb 50-metre penalties and free reversals. So, B-Man, do you agree? We don't have to go on and on about this. Were we undisciplined all night?
There were times we were undisciplined, yeah. I think there were times where not so much undisciplined, but I think, as I said, the pressure, there were situations where they didn't manage the pressure, and maybe that looked like, well, definitely we were undisciplined on a number of occasions, Cozzy being one of them. Did he get reported, by the way?
He did. He got suspended for a week. He won't be playing.
Oh, did he?
round one.
There you go. I didn't even catch that.
Yeah.
So
Got
just
a
on
$1,500 fine for the second one.
Yeah, so
as well.
We
what was the second one? I didn't even know there was a second one.
Yeah, there was the bump on
Cripps was a week.
Cripps was the week, and there was a a punch, I think.
Right. Okay. Well, we were, and then the Sparrow, the
Sparrow
350
got
meters,
and Viney got a fine, and Sparrow I think got a fine as well. Was it?
So yes, we're ill disciplined. It's amazing, actually. We could have won the game at all. Carlton are rubbish.
Yeah.
Roosted Far also wants to know what happened to Ed Langdon and Christian Salem. Their output has plummeted, so I don't think Ed had a great game. Salem has failed to fire all season since his return from the thyroid issue. George, what are your thoughts on Langdon and Salem, two players that had a massive impact in our premiership year and in the grand final, but both haven't been as impactful this season?
I think for Salem, the reality is, and we'll talk about this, and people forget about it constantly, is if you have a limited pre-season, people never really come back from it. They can get the miles into the legs, but they never really come back from it.
He had a pre-season, but then missed it.
Missed 7 weeks or something.
Where he
like
couldn't
7 or
really
10.
train or run or anything.
Yeah. So, that's pretty straightforward. I think by the end of the season, you never really recover, and multiple times players have mentioned this sort of thing. Langdon, I think, has been worked out a bit by oppositions. We've spoken about it in the past, where they deliberately don't play down the Langdon wing. He's not given the space. He's absolutely devastating to the opposition if he is given the space, and they've just learnt to shut him down. We mentioned he's not a great kick, and it was exposed in this game. We had a couple of opportunities that he managed to put it out on the full or miss the target completely. But they're playing a much tighter line on Langdon than what they have in the past. So, but you never know whether players are carrying injury towards the end of the season. He's played the vast majority of the games as well, and he plays long minutes in the game. So by the end of the season, he should be a bit tired.
I thought Langers had a pretty good game, actually. And so, again, I haven't watched the replay or read anything, and so I'm just looking at the numbers now and the ratings. So I thought he played pretty well, and the ratings reflect that. He was our fourth highest rated player.
Wow.
So it was Petrarca number 1 for us, Stephen May number 2, Cozzy number 3, and Langers number 4, and Nibbler number 5, and then Lockie Hunter, and then big kudos, actually, now that I think about it, for Joel Smith, who was number 6. And Salem did have a quiet game, but basically he had what his season average is this season, Salo. So, he had basically the same player rating as Trent Rivers and Maxi Gorman, better than Fritter, Bowie, Spargo, Sparrow, Jordan, Tomo, Chandler. So he didn't have a shocker. But yeah, Langers had a really good game. I think Langers had a couple of moments though where he slipped over, where that were frustrating 3 times.
He slipped over a lot, but a few of our players were slipping all night, which was strange.
Yeah,
considering the perfect night.
Perfect night, but people say, get the stops on, but I think they all wear the same sort of boots. That's like they've all got the same footy boots on, so who knows what that's about. But yeah, I thought Langers was pretty good, and so was Hunter. I thought he played pretty well too, and the numbers reflect that. So
I was going to say, I thought Ed Langdon's disposal efficiency was terrible, but he's had 80% disposal efficiency. So
it was just those few critical times.
Yeah.
There was one in the last quarter. He was on the wing, streaming forward, and we had players free about the 50-metre line. He just kicked it straight out of bounds.
Yeah. There
they're the coach killer sort of ones.
Yeah, but he had 6 score involvements. He kicked a goal, 3 clearances for a player who's not known for being a super clearance. He had 8 contested possessions for a player who's not really sort of a contested possession player. He was on time on ground was 97% for Langer. So, it's hard to knock that sort of performance. But the one that on the player ratings that this really stood out for me was Tom de Koning. He was by far and away the best player. So he was number 1 on the field with 20.9 rating points, and Track was 16.8. So that's a fair gap between Tom de Koning. He had 4 score involvement, kicked a couple of goals, 3 clearances, 12 contested possessions. Yeah. That's fair going for the young fella.
So we've got a voicemail on behalf of Demon Princess. So take a listen.
So this is on behalf of the Demon Princess. She's too shy to come on. So as a husband, I just do what I'm told to do and say what I'm told to say. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Everyone's disappointed, but now is not the time to make emotional decisions. Can we focus on our young stars, Rivers, Sparrow, McVee, JVR, Taj, Bowie? What does the club need to do over the break to push these guys on and to the next level? Thanks, guys.
B-Man, you want to take that one?
It's a great point, and I think that's something that Goody did say in the lead up and maybe even in the presser is that, and kudos to Goody, is that his commitment to playing younger players means that, we're mid-table for average age every week we run out, and that all the players that were just mentioned are all going to be better players after another pre-season, particularly JVR. I mean, all of them, but JVR will fill out. He'll get his tank up. He was really starting to run out of gas, which is at the end of the season, which is hardly surprising given his age. I think, all of those points are super important, and particularly the one about not throwing out the baby with the bathwater, because, this is, as Goody's talked about, he didn't say in the presser, but this is not about, this is about having a team that's in contention for 6, 7, 8, 9 years. And, those players are going to be long-term players for the D's. Rivers had his best season, that you see when players go up. He was so much better than he was the previous season. Bowie, I think, is another young player. Cozzy is already at a high level, so he's just going to continue to play at that level. As I said, JVR is the one for me. But there's also other players. Disco Turner, he was on the verge of being selected. Petty's not particularly old. How old's Pet? He's, 23, 24?
Yeah, I think he came in. He's the Sparrow Jordan vintage, yeah.
We're going to have pick 4 in the draft. Maybe we can package them. We're going to get some quality top 10 draft picks come in. Hopefully, some decent forwards. There's a lot to be super positive about in terms of how good our young players, but also how many games have already got. As much as this is going to be tough backing up. Next finals, we'll make finals again. We'll finish top 4 again. If we do, we'll be in this situation again. These players will have all experienced the 96,000 people that were there and, consecutive weeks, or it's 96,000 this week. So, all of that experience and another pre-season, stands us in really good stead going forward, I reckon.
Just in terms of the 96,000, doesn't it really say something about Thursday night footy that you got Melbourne and Collingwood not being able to get to that 96,000, and then the Melbourne Carlton, which obviously Carlton's got a large base and Melbourne supporters do come out in finals. So I think it says something about Melbourne Collingwood not being able to get to that 96,000. I don't know if they release more tickets for the semi-finals.
Something a bit about 22 degrees at game.
No, that may be in the rain.
The game in shorts.
But people have bought tickets. There's no one rocking up on the day based on the weather, or do you think people aren't coming?
There is.
You reckon?
Yeah, heaps.
Who have bought an expensive ticket and then don't come?
Some people have got more money than sense. A lot of MCC people I've heard saw on Demonland. There were people who were offering their seats that they had out in the outer who decided to sit in the MCC.
Yeah. All right. So there you go. Forget that. So we had a few miscellaneous posts from people who needed to vent or had points that weren't questions and just some general commentary. So I'll read a couple of them out here. Horny for Gorny writes, obviously not the result we wanted, gutted to say the least. The continued ability to dominate all key stats and just keep the door open for the opposition has to be the main focus this summer, regardless of how hollow I feel with the season being over and the Ronald Barassi news. I can't help but still be proud. This club was an embarrassment for so long, and just watching us win games and consistently knowing we will compete has been an honour. From the game, how good was May? Curnow was nullified. Take a bow, sir. I felt like Spargo was much better than I expected. Where did Judd McVie come from? Kid is a top 10 player in my eyes. The class, skill and nerve of him is unreal. We lost the game in the one area we've all been scared of for the past 2 to 3 years. We just lack the ability to score. We work too hard to score a scrappy goal, and then in the past 2 weeks we respond by letting the Pies and the Blues waltz out of the centre and bounce and erase our work. In the magical year that was 21, we were that team cruising out the front of stoppages, but this year it seemed to be absent. Still bullish on next year, but feel like if it doesn't happen next year, it makes sense to hit a mini rebuild to ensure a Geelong level of success for the next decade. I expect that we will see Gus hang up the boots, and that will be a massive loss for us. Not only for his playing ability, but his leadership and empowering relationship with all the boys. But we don't know what's happening there, so hard to say. But just one point from there that I'll take that I might ask you, Spargo. I thought he was all right. Sort of after seeing him, I'm a bit. Yeah, I know you've been going into bat, big man for him the last few weeks to get in the team, and they just didn't. And this week they did, and I thought he was all right.
Well, the knock on is, I think, is a reasonable knock because he doesn't get enough of the pill. But,
yeah, well, that's always been.
I mean,
knock,
I would have had him ahead of Laurie. He only got 5 disposals, so he didn't get much of the pill either in a full game of footy. And the pass that he kicked inside to 50, I forget, was it DeCozzi? It was just, that's, simple 15 metres, but they're the ones that we just don't hit. And just on that nudge in the chat room notes that Daniel Hoyne, who I didn't listen to this week, but it was on this afternoon, who I reckon he's the best analyst. He nudge notes that Hoyne's take on the game in Melbourne's performance, he was very measured, talked basically about how accuracy is the key factor here, said all the talk about our forward line is a furphy as we generated 15 more scoring shots than the opposition in the finals, and that any team would take that. Nudge was noting that Hoyne says doesn't help in this circumstance, but it's important to note that we're not broken and that, it's not like a rebuild is necessary or that there's major structural problems. It's just got to fix up that execution.
Spirit Norm Smith vents, so many questions, so many. The losses still hurt. We are angry, frustrated, gutted, disappointed. Some positives in the year, but ultimately we had a huge premiership chance blown away too quickly. It's been a terrible finals campaign, a horrible September. Gus knocked out by Thug Maynard, lost to the Pies. Tribunal misdirect and misrepresentation led to Maynard being excused, lost to the Blues. Rest in peace, Ronald Barassi, an MFC legend. Umpires, don't even mention them. Is scum being too nice a description? Some horrible, horrible decisions. Cozzy's reversal, just one of the many shocking errors. Premierships are hard to win. We found out that if you are having a dysfunctional forward entries and dysfunctional forwards, the lack of scoring will cost you big time. Learning's connection, forward to centre. Goody's rhetoric is wearing thin. All right, let's get on to the next one. Roger the First says, when you see 2 of the sides in the bottom half of the 8 make it through to the preliminary finals, it shows just how even the competition really is. Wasn't much between all the sides in the 8, perhaps the Saints excepted. We lost both our finals due to poor kicking rather than we were beaten. Had we beaten the Pies, we would have been serious contenders. We lost. Had we beaten Carlton, it was still going to be a tough ask to go all the way. That is how close the competition is. My question is this: taking into account the list that will be reviewed and refined, as well as tweaks made to our game plan, unforeseen injuries aside, tell me why I shouldn't consider us being not just a contender, but a serious contender next year. I reckon we will be. I think people forget premierships are extremely hard to come by. So, big man, you're no doubt in full agreement with Roger. Do you want to play devil's advocate and tell him why he shouldn't consider us a serious finals contender?
All right, I can play that game. Is that we're not going to be a serious final contender until we can have more elite kicks in the team than we currently have, and that's going to be a challenge because it's not like there's a whole bunch of elite kicks hiding behind the couch and that we can grab.
And any kids aren't going to be the difference, unless we somehow get this number one.
We only
draft
need
pick.
2 or 3 more elite kicks. We get Harley Reid in there, who we probably get, and it turns out he's an average kick.
Yeah, does anyone know whether he can kick?
Yeah, so is it McAdam?
Yeah, he'll be playing for us unless they can't do a deal.
He's nominated Melbourne, and he's exactly the sort of player who we need. He's good in the air. He's sneaky tall. He's a younger Melksham. But
he's 28.
I don't think he's an elite kick, but I'd say he's probably close to elite on that AFL averages. They're the sorts of players that you need to be bringing in. I'm not sure what's the other player, the Freo player that was looking for another home.
Yeah, but he's going to Skilda or something. Liam Henry, is that his name?
Yeah, Liam Henry. Where's he?
He's not coming to Melbourne.
He's nominated Hawthorn.
Yeah.
What? He's nominated Hawthorn. Who's another team who, by the way, probably taking a line through Clarkson. Mitchell's really gone after elite kicks, and he's adios players who can't kick. So a lot depends on getting them in. So why we can't is that, you can't get enough elite kicks in one go. So, maybe 2 years away. But I agree with Roger anyway.
There was something I heard somewhere that Adelaide want Petty for McAdam, and I just thought that was
I did have to laugh, though, at the idea that whether it's true or not, that one of the reasons McAdam wants out is Burgess. And he's going to come to the D's where he's got Burgess 2.0 and Selwyn Griffith, who will push him even further.
Well, I watched McAdam's highlights, and he looked good in the highlights. But then again, as I always said, my 2 minutes of highlights are fantastic, and you wouldn't want me.
I've never seen a bad highlight.
Highlights are great. Love it. So we've done. That was what. Okay, so Supreme Demon asks, what do we need to do to recuperate? Did I read this already? Sounds like I have. I did read it in another one. Sorry, Supreme Demon, we've answered that question. I put it in twice. So this is, got a voicemail from Demonologist about his 2024, our last roll of the dice. So let's have a listen to Demonologist.
Hi, Andy, George and Ben Man. It's Demonologist here. Like all D supporters, we are bitterly disappointed how season 2023 ended. Our thoughts, once we have calmed down, should inevitably turn to season 2024 and our list management issues. But I'm instead looking even a little bit further to the end of season 2025. If we look at those players most likely to play first-team football in 24-25, I believe we are approaching a difficult future. If we look at which players won't be at Melbourne in 2024, one can probably assume that'll be Brown, Dunstan, Grundy, Harms, Hibberd, Jordan and Melksham, and they won't be there. And I'm devastated that Brayshaw may also join this group. That's quite a lot of experience and ability that's departing. We must admit there are also players who are ageing and will likely retire or will be significantly in decline, such as Gawn, May, McDonald, Salem, Tomlinson, Viney, and perhaps Hunter over the next couple of years. That leaves a list of 19 key players, and we must certainly hope that none of these are seriously injured over the next few seasons. There are another 9 young players on our list who may or may not develop sufficiently to make AFL. And yes, of course, we may recruit some talent too. But I hear you say to me, that's a lot of ifs and buts and maybes. Let's just focus on building and improving for season 2024. But if the so-called window of opportunity for a premiership is a reality, then based on some of my fears, 2024 is our last best chance. I'm terrified that if it's not closed by 2024, then definitely by the end of 2025, the window will be closed and we'll be entering that dreaded rebuilding phase. Can you allay my fears? Are my suppositions and concerns just wrong? Perhaps I just need a good lie down. Cheers, boys.
So perhaps this is something that we revisit in the next couple of weeks in our season review and sort of a brief preview of 2024. But briefly, gentlemen, is 2024 last roll of the dice with this talented list? B-Man, I'll start with you, followed by George. Don't have to go into too much detail.
I think all very, very valid points. What I would just briefly say is that all clubs face exactly the same issue. The second point would be is that this is an incredible opportunity we've got in this next draft period. Like it's almost like it's unheard of to a team that's finished top 4 3 years in a row to go into a draft period with, is it 3 top 10 picks, 2 top 10 picks, and that gives us a lot of opportunity that very few. Geelong certainly hasn't had. I know that they topped up a little bit with their one go at it. Look at what Geelong were able to do, topping up with what they got for. My mind's it's Kelly.
Kelly.
Yeah, so look what that was. What one of them flagged their ability to get those get Stengel in, and we're in incredible. You've got to take advantage of that, of course. So I think it's totally valid points, but I think we've got the team, the list team's got some pretty good credits in the bank. In terms of how they manage this list, and actually the demographics are really good. Compare our demographics to the Dogs. The Dogs have got huge holes in them between like 23, 24, and then 28, 29. We've got players through that. Nibblers 26. You've got Tommy Mack and those ones that they will go out, but that's why it's so important that they've got games into players like Disco Turner. Wowie coming in. That's, as I said before, I think Goody's done a good job at blooding the young players and getting them serious game time. So, but the points remain valid. Not, absolutely.
Picks 5, 13, 24, and 32. So we've got 4 in the top 32. And that might blow out a bit with the father-son and all that, but they're all gone. They're all gone to whoever they're going to anyway. So it's still effectively 4 picks in the top 32.
2024 is certainly not the last chance of the roll of the dice, but a lot depends on what we can do to plug the obvious holes. The biggest single hole that we've got, assuming Grundy's gone, is finding a second backup ruck. Yeah. We have no one. There is no one available. Verril's the next one in line, and he's not,
a couple of years away.
And he's not in line.
He makes it fingers crossed, isn't it?
Yeah, we have no backup since we lost Magic Door last year. That's it. That's why we recruited Grundy. So we need a backup ruck. We cannot depend on Max playing 25 games.
No, and he's come to the end of another season where he's got this time a broken foot. Last year he was carrying an injury. He's physically exhausted. The Oppos target him. But just on that caller's point, I mean, I agree. I think they're absolutely good, all good points. It's partly why this makes it such a kick in the guts not to win it this year, because you're right, the window of opportunity is not open forever. Even if it is 24, 25, even if it is 26, you still got to win them. And this was a much better chance this year to win it than it was last year. We've left one on the table this year. And of course the club will say, will burn in their guts and drive them in the preseason and all of that stuff. But as we've talked about, everything's got to go right to win a flag. It didn't for us. Who knows how the luck will roll next year.
Yeah. The other obvious area that we're deficient in is the forward line, because Ben Brown probably won't play next year. T-Mac probably won't play next year. Melcham's unavailable next year. There's 3 players. Petty comes back. That's great. We discovered Petty by raiding the back line. But the reality is we're still short a player. If Petty goes down, or one of those players, JVR goes down next year, who have we got as the backup? Again, we've got no one.
That's where luck, I mean, as Webber's pointed out, really, injury is the number one thing in football. It is the number one determining factor in a chance of winning a flag is injury and then luck. And so if we go through a full season next year and our forward line remains for 23 games and a final of Petty, Fritsch and JVR, well, that's a bloody good forward line, isn't it? And so we won't have the issues. No one will be talking about our connection and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, but the reality is that's unlikely. We've got to make the do the risk, the risks associated with one of those players going down. We're in real strife.
Yeah, maybe we need I've got an idea, George. How about we get in a really good ruck and turn him into a forward?
Ooh, that's an interesting one. Well, yeah, why don't we do that? But I'm starting to wonder whether just looking at the ruck options around, there's not many around. Short of pulling someone from the secondaries, but
Tom DeConey, let's get him.
I was wondering how Sean Darcy was feeling now that he's the number 2 ruck to Jackson at Fremantle.
Well, I've heard he's going to re-sign, so he's off the table.
Oh, that's a pity. Yeah.
Didn't we learn our lesson last time getting someone who's a...
Can we get Jack? I want Hogan. I want Hogan
back and Jacko back.
There was a lot of talk on social media. Why did we get rid of Hogan? We would win a premiership with Hogan. Well, didn't we get
we got May
and didn't we win a premiership sort of because of May? So you can't have it both ways. Yeah, I'd love to have him back, but it wasn't like, anyway. We don't have him. Finally, some positivity. Our AFLW team came face-to-face with its fellow women's footy founding team, the Western Bulldogs. The Doggies have fallen from grace since the inception of the AFLW competition, where they had notched up a premiership in their second season. Going into this match, they were winless, and that win-loss ratio stayed that way by the end of the match. The D's, on the other hand, have taken the game up a notch since clinching their first premiership last season. They've won the first 2 matches of the season by 42 and 77 points respectively, and mirroring where the men's team failed to capitalise on their dominance with inaccuracy. The women's mirrored that in the first half, but stormed home to win by 42 points. They had multiple players kick 2 goals, with Hall, Zanker, Gay, Mithen and Paxi Paxman all booting 2. Taylor Hanks with the D's leading possession, winning with 25 possessions and a goal. George, give us a bit of a summary of the match to cleanse our palate from the men's debacle.
Yeah, this was a cleansing game. Like I said at the start of the program, this was a well-oiled machine in operation. It was really brilliant to watch. Just to add some more statistics to it, we've now won 12 games in a row, and we haven't conceded a single goal in the last quarter of any of those 12 games.
Oh, wow.
Wow, that's incredible.
And I think I saw another incredible statistic. In this game, the Dogs kicked 3 goals in the third quarter. In those 12 games, there's only been 4 goals kicked against us in the half. Which
so that's
basically from half time, the game's been over for every other side. It's just amazing what they're doing all across the ground. We've got just first class players. Against the Dogs, Ellie Blackburn, who's played in the Melbourne team when they were playing, I think, the exhibition games originally before she moved to the Dogs. She had 20 possessions till half time. They swung Shelley Heath onto her, and she finished with 29 for the game. So absolutely shut her down completely.
I've heard that's the second time this year that Shelley Heath has shut someone down in the second half. Can I make a suggestion? Why not player on these players from the beginning?
She's got the wrong name too, because isn't it the heaters putting the cooler on them?
Whatever it is, she's only a slight girl, but she's like I'll use the term leech. When she attaches herself to someone, she does not let go. It's just amazing to watch. Anyhow, the Dogs were only down by 8 points in the third quarter, but from there on in, the game was all over. They just ran out of them. We've spoken about the rotations and the limited numbers, and the fitness of the Melbourne side is proving to be instrumental in the wins. It was a great game all round. Plenty of goals, plenty of goal kickers. We're once again worried about Elisa Bannon. Early in the first quarter, she got she was about to snap for the goal, and she got hit in the head at the same time, and then had 2 bodies collapse on top of her. And fortunately, all she did was get a twisted ankle that took her out of the game from that early stage in the first quarter. Everybody's heart was in the mouth, hoping that nothing too serious had come of it, and that turned out to be the case. But she was off the ground. But we had plenty of other players standing up, particularly in the forward line. Taylor Harris was instrumental attacking the ball and opposition players. Casey Sheriff did a brilliant crumbing goal at one point. Eden Zanko picked up a couple of goals, but the midfield is just unbeatable at the moment with what we're running, with the girls that we're running through there. Paxman, Purcell, Tyler Hanks is, I think I said it last week, if there's the Brownlow equivalent in this game, she should be leading it. She is just amazing. Her ability to kick the ball under pressure would warrant a position certainly in the Melbourne men's side, because we're desperately in need of those sort of players. Just brilliant to watch. Eliza McNamara coming back in only her third game after a bad injury is really coming into her best in the game. She's really getting the confidence, and she's, again, very similar style player to Hanks. In the ruck, Georgia Campbell in only her third game. I was really worried about it at the start of the season, who, if Lauren Pearce goes down and has had injuries, particularly to her knees in the past, if she goes down, we're in real strife. Or Georgia Campbell's an excellent ruck, and is proving to be so, which is a great fill-up for us because, like I said, we need the extra backup ruck, and she's certainly providing it, and also providing the relief for Pearce so that she doesn't have to ruck for the whole game, and we don't have to drag Taylor Harris down into the rucking role that we did last season. So there are only 3 teams now that have undefeated. Surprisingly, they're also a game clear, of course, the 4th side. But after the games this coming weekend, I suspect that there will be the teams inside the 8 will be a clear of the teams that are outside the 8. So potentially we could be 2 games clear after having played only 4 games in a 10-game season. So this is going to put us in good stead for certainly for finals. We can almost write us in for finals at this very early stage in the season. So it's going to be interesting. There's differences in quality, serious differences in quality at the top end and the bottom end of the competition. So we're playing Hawthorn this week, and I'm expecting another big win that we've already to top off the 2 big wins that we've already had.
3 big wins.
Well, 3 wins, but big wins.
So okay. The 70-point wins. Yep. B-Man, did you watch any of the game?
No, I haven't watched it yet. I couldn't. Straight into denial.
Yeah.
Football, spring carnival. But I am planning on sitting down and watching it. I just haven't been able to get my enthusiasm up for footy at all.
Well, I think we're going to leave it there. We're almost at the 3-hour mark, and we will be back in the coming weeks to bring you our 2023 season review, where we will dissect the disappointing season, what went right, what went wrong. We'll revisit some of the preseason predictions and see just how wrong or right we got it. We'll also cast our eyes on the next season and try to figure out just what we need to do to right the ship and ensure we can steer ourselves deeper into September. Later in the year, hopefully, we'll be back to bring you a wrap-up of our trade and draft period, and I'll try to get MFC recruitment manager Jason Taylor back on the show to give us his insights into our picks. And before I get into the thank yous for tonight's show, I just wanted to thank all the people, whether from Demonland or our various social media pages, who have provided content in the form of questions and comments over the year. Those questions have formed an integral part of our show, and we really appreciate the time that people take to pose those questions and comments. And also a big thank you to anybody who has called into the show or left us a voicemail. We really appreciate that aspect of the podcast as well. A big thank you also goes to my 2 co-hosts. These guys rock up week in, week out, win, loss or draw. With no draws this year, though. They don't get paid to do this, but without them, it's just going to be me reading out some questions and not being able to provide you with anything but doom and gloom. Their statistics and positivities and level-headedness balances out my storm clouds of disaster. So thank you, George and B-Man. Thank you to you, our loyal listeners. Without you, we're just shouting some unsolicited opinions into the ether. And thank you very much for listening. On to tonight's thank yous. Thank you to Victoria L from Facebook, and thank you to Cam and Farina from Instagram for their comments and questions. Thank you to our voicemailers, ALS, Salty Demon Princess via her prince. Demonologist, 13th flag is coming, and Noah from Bentley. And as always, your questions and comments, as I said, they do form an integral part of the show. So thank you to our Demonland posters who submitted questions and comments this week. Thank you to Supreme Demon, Demon Eyes, Daniel E288, RPFC, Demon WA, Weber, At the Break of Gorn, Super Sub Shacky, What Say What, Monocular, Clintosaurus, Doug Reamer, BDA, Lazy, Gunners, Great Northern Summer, Despicable Me, Pipe Fitter, Demon's Rule, Buck Naked, Dr. Gonzo, Everything's a Blur, Roosted Far, Horny Fagorny, Spirit of Norm Smith, Roger the First, D Knox, Jabroni, El Diablo 14, Demons 1, 58er, John Demonic, and Bates Mate, and Ned Legg, who got in a late question. Some of those last ones I did read out had participated in some discussions, but I just for time I couldn't include it all in. But thank you for your participation. Thank you to my co-hosts again, as I mentioned, Georgia Bigman. Thank you to you again for our loyal listeners. Don't forget, leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast from, and we'll read it out the next time we rock up for a show. Go Demons.
Go Red Leggers.
Come on, Demons. Come on, Demons. Come on, Demons. Come on, Demons. Come on, come on, come on, come on, Demons. I've got this feeling